I work for a commercial cleaning company who specializes in cleaning up rundown, abandoned buildings and getting them ready for refurbishment. We were hired to clean out an old hospital that had been abandoned for some 20-odd years. My team, of which there were 3 of us, was assigned to the behavioral health unit, or more simply, the psych ward. While I was clearing out rooms of dusty old linens and mattress pads, I found an old marble journal tucked under one of the pads. I opened it and flipped through quickly and saw that it was about half filled with journal entries. I thought it was pretty cool, so I slid it in my back pocket so I could read it later and went back to work. Totally forgot about it until I got in the car and drove home. When I got home, I decided to read it, and what I found inside was terrifying, mostly because of the similarities between what was in the journal and what we'd been cleaning up earlier today. I'll go over the connections between what I found in the journal and what I saw today later, but before that, let me share the story. I'm going to try and stay as true to the writing in the journal as possible, so that means some things may be a little misspelled and some grammar might not be perfect. If it's underlined on the page, I'll underline it here. Written all in caps, I'll type it all in caps. So, let's get started. Day 1, 12 p.m. The ER nurse lied to me. She said I could leave after 3 days. The doctor here, though, she said she decides when I leave. She said I won't be out in 3 days. I don't want to be here. I don't belong here. Day 2, 11 a.m. I've been here 24 hours. I don't want to be here. I don't belong here. They do patient checks every 15 minutes. If you're in your room, they knock on the door. They don't care about the time. I can't sleep. They give me my meds and they say that I have mood stabilizers in them for me tonight. I miss Taya. I miss my bed. This is my world now. Day 3, 11 a.m. It's been 42 hours. I'm feeling a little better. I broke down last night. I played some Monopoly earlier and it was a lot of fun. After I broke down, I was given meds to calm me down. I laughed for the first time since coming here. Day 5. I'm okay. I'll be okay. Day 7. It's time to go home. They won't let me leave. I don't know why. I ask and they ignore me. Just want to go home. Day 10. There was a huge boom outside. None of the nurses reacted. They just carried on as normal. All I can see out the window is black smoke. Day 14. We found a nurse in the hallway this morning. He was dead. We've been seeing less and less each day, but since we found him, we haven't seen anyone else. Day 27. There hasn't been a single nurse or doctor or security or anyone at all since we found the nurse in the hallway. The door knocking hasn't stopped, though. Every 15 minutes, if a room door is closed, it will knock. Food still shows up. Meds are still showing up in the medicine window. Day 28. Gerald tried to jump through the window at the nurse's station. Something we couldn't see stopped him and dragged him back out. He was dragged all the way to the quiet room. We hesitantly followed and watched as he was hauled up into a slab bed. We watched the straps wrap themselves around him and tie him down. Then the room door slammed shut. That was this morning. It's almost lights out. We could still hear him screaming. Poor guy. I guess security is still here. Day 32. It's been over a month. We put the body of the nurse in Gerald's room, since he doesn't need it anymore. Gerald's still wrapped up down the hall in the quiet room. He's still screaming. I don't know how. Out the window is just smoke. Large, rolling, jet black columns of smoke, painting the sky a large swath of uncolor. We're still fed. I don't know where it comes from, but it always shows up at the end of the hallway and wheels itself down to us. Day whatever. It's been a while. A lot's happened. A lot of lights have stopped working. The knocking never does. Some of the windows have cracks in them. Don't know how. None of us could even scratch them. There's no more outside. It's just black. The smoke took over the sky weeks ago. I'm really not sure about time. Haven't seen natural light since. We only know days because the lights, what few we have left, dim for a bit every few hours or so. The water stopped getting hot a few days ago. With the lights, the windows, and now the water, it's almost like this place is dying. Gerald stopped screaming eventually. Still strapped down. We can see him moving from time to time, so we know he's alive. Don't know how he survives, but I do know that none of us want to piss off whatever's doing this. Day, I don't even know. We have to get out of here. Doris went into her room and the door closed behind her. It won't open. Something unseen dragged her to the bed and held her there. We watched as the bed made itself with her in it. That wouldn't have been so bad, except that when it was done, Doris was just a red smear between the sheets and the bed. There's not even a bulge where her body should be. She's just gone. The door stayed closed ever since. No one's brave enough to go in their room now. We're all just staying in the day room for now. Been a few days. I lost this book for a bit. It's not that strange. Sometimes stuff just goes missing here. We just assume it's the housekeepers that got it. Strange part is that I found it in Gerald's room, next to the body of the nurse. Now, he's just a semi-wet pile of meat and bones. No idea why that room won't clean itself. Lost a couple other folks to housekeepers. That's what we call what happened to Doris. Maybe we'll try to look in Gerald's room for more stuff we lost. Day after last entry. It was a bad idea. The nurse wasn't dead. I don't know how it could be. It was literally just a pile of meat and bones. And yet, we were in Gerald's room looking for lost stuff. Ron bumped the nurse's body and it jumped at him. It dug its bone fingers into his neck. A wet squelching noise accompanied it every moment. Ron strangled, gurgled, screamed, but he quickly stopped. I'm ashamed to say that we ran. We left him there, with the nurse thing still digging away at his neck. We closed and barricaded the door. Day, I don't know anymore. It's been a few days. I can still hear the nurse thing moving around in Gerald's room. Every now and again we hear wet slaps against the floor. The flies are terrible. Clark got taken by the housekeepers. A window broke out of nowhere. It just shattered. Some of the smoke came in, just a little bit. It's like a creeping miasma. It slithered its way across the ceiling and just sat there. We used a table to block the window and keep any more smoke from getting in. Now we're just watching it. Day, who cares? We need to leave. Ginny decided to touch the smoke, and it grabbed her like a snake. A thin trail came out and coiled itself around her outstretched arm and down her body and dragged her into itself. It's unthinkable how such a small amount of smoke could consume somebody like that. I say consumed because that's what it did. It ate her. Not all at once, and not quickly. We tried to save her, tried to drag her back down to us. Even with all of us pulling, we couldn't get her to budge. I think I heard something in her pop, or break, or dislocate when we were pulling. But we couldn't save her, so we had to watch. We had to watch as it slowly pulled her into itself. There was no noise, except for Ginny's screeches and screams, but it did eat her, eventually. I don't think I'll ever forget her screams. We stay away from it now. It stays on the ceiling, moving around, but never comes down. We're now living in fear of yet another unexplained thing. Too long. The nurse No idea. Was he ever dead? Was he ever even human? Gerald is not dead somehow, but he's still strapped down. Doris, housekeeping. Aspen, housekeeping. Donald, housekeeping. Ron, the nurse thing. Jenny, eaten by the smoke. Daniel, eaten by the smoke. We're leaving. We've lost too many people to just sit here trying to survive. We've unblocked the window and hopped out. There's a small landing with an access hatch and a half-story below. I'm leaving this book here as a way to ensure that we're not forgotten. If you find this, I didn't live to come back for it. Goodbye. Note: this journal was found in the room of a mental patient who jumped out of his window to his death. I came back. I didn't write that. I don't know who did, but it wasn't me. I found this journal right where I left it. It's just me now. We didn't even make it out of the hospital. I came back because I'd rather die here, where at least I'm taken care of. We were exploring the hospital for about a week, I'd say. This place hasn't changed much. The black smoke is still here. It moves around the ceiling, following me. I feel like it's watching me, like a predator watching its prey. Not actively hunting, but just waiting for any little slip up so it can bag itself an easy meal. It won't be from me. I guess I should explain what happened and how everyone died. When we left, there were still 6 of us. Me, Jules, Richard, Alberto, Gwen, and Ray. I don't know what we expected to find when we left, but there was no way for us to guess what we saw. Narrator's note: the entire next page is full of scribbled out bits. Just woke up from a nap. Something more is going on. I took a nap after writing that last page, and when I woke up, I saw it was completely scribbled out. I didn't do that. I guess something didn't like what I had to say. I can't even remember what I wrote, honestly. I can't remember most of yesterday. This place hurts to be in. Hurts to think about. It just hurts. Good news, though. The food still shows up. It's been 2 days. I guess I'll try again to write down what happened when I left. Outside the window was a small drop down to an access hatch. We quickly filed out and fell down. I couldn't help but notice no more smoke made its way through the window. Even now, sitting here writing this, I don't have the window blocked. Doesn't much make a difference, if I'm honest. There's no weather. There's no wind. Everything is still. I don't hear any animals or bugs. No cars, no people. Just silence. The world is so empty. Back to what happened. We hopped down to the access shaft. We managed to open it and drop down to the floor below. I'd tell you what floor number, but I honestly don't know. When we hopped down, we were in a hallway. It was long and semi-lit. I guess the rest of the hospital was falling apart, just like our unit. Half the lights were either flickering dimly or just out. Still enough light to see what we were going through. The hallway had elevators on one side and a few rooms on the other. The rooms were labeled Radiology 1, 2, 3, and so on. Throughout the entire hallway was a low humming and beeping, the sound of medical equipment left on. Being all too familiar with house cleaning, we didn't dare go into any of the rooms. Gwen wanted to take the elevator, but the rest of us said no. There's no telling what horror that would lead to. Once we got our bearings, we chose a direction and started walking. It was dark. Could barely see the floor. I guess that's why we didn't notice at first. When we did notice, we were too terrified to move. We'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes. The hallway just went on and on. Every now and again we would pass a sign with an arrow and the word visitation on it, pointing the way we were going. Occasionally, we would come to a large intersection with multiple hallways leading off. It was in one of these intersections we noticed what was around us. All over the walls were semi-dark stains, the color of dried blood. Everywhere on the floor we found wet piles of rotting meat and bones. Like our nurse thing. It's amazing how we didn't smell it, but once we noticed, it was all we could smell. It was horrible. Just thinking about it makes me want to puke, even now. Sorry, I had to go throw up. Caught a whiff of the smell. I didn't want to think about where it came from. Richard and Jules, we were stood in the intersection, surrounded by potential monsters. We had no idea how long these things could last like this. Hell, they were literally half rotted. Once we found our nerve, we decided to move on. It's honestly a miracle we hadn't bumped into a pile of them by now. Our luck couldn't last forever, though. In the dark confines of a particularly tight hallway, Richard lost his balance and ended up stepping on a meat pile. It instantly rose up and swallowed him. More an amorphous blob of meat and bones than anything resembling a human. His scream was quick, but loud. Loud enough to wake the dead. Unfortunately, that's not just an expression. Apparently noise also sets them off. Two more of the meat blobs suddenly launched themselves at the closest person. Jules was gone in an instant. The blobs fully enclosed her before she could even scream. Richard was a bit slower. We watched as whatever bones the blob had forced their way into and through him. A long bone through the neck, what looked like maybe fingers digging into his guts, a couple of ribs into his thigh, on and on. We watched in horror for what felt like hours, too scared to move. When he finally stopped moving, we managed to collect our senses and run. Gwen. A few days later, we had moved a few floors down via the staircase. We were never able to take one the entire way. There was always a blockage forcing us out into the hospital proper. Through more halls and rooms, we weren't sure that we could make it out. Gwen was leading us through the hall. She took a turn, and all we heard was the faintest squeak. Then nothing. We waited around the corner for a while before carefully peeking our heads out. About a foot from where the wall turned into a massive wall of black smoke. Floor to ceiling, wall to wall, there was no way through. Gwen must have walked right into it, gone before she even realized it. Poor kid. Ray had the worst fate of anyone, except maybe Gerald. Ray was leading the remains of our group, just Alberto, me, and Ray, through the kitchen. This was about a day after Gwen, and we were walking through the kitchen, past stoves and burners and rotten food. Ray saw something on the counter, I still don't know what, and reached for it. His hand was cut in half, all 4 fingers gone to the knuckle. Next, the skin on his arm was peeled off, like skin on a fish. He watched his arm get sliced into small sections, unable to move. Alberto and I tried to pull him away, but we couldn't. After his arm, Ray was haphazardly thrown onto the counter, and the rest of his body was cut up, prepared like meat at a butcher shop. Saw a few pieces get flung into a pot on the stove before Albert and I ran while the cooking went to work on the rest of Ray. I skipped my meals the next few days after I got back, just in case. Alberto was just unlucky. After what happened to Ray, we decided to go back to our unit. It was all too much. Alberto and I quickly backtracked. A few days later, we found a staircase that said, "To BHU Psych." We were almost back. Running up the stairs, Alberto didn't notice a blob on the next step up. Stepped right on it. Of course, it launched itself onto him. It ended up tackling Alberto over the railing and down into the empty central column of the staircase. They fell, Alberto and the blob. They fell what must have been 10 stories. Of course, we couldn't have been that high up. I watched them tumble down, the blob ripping chunks out of him. Then I noticed what was at the bottom. A roiling, bubbling, almost boiling pool of black smoke. All the way down, Alberto and the blob were plummeting towards it. He fell quietly. The meat blob fell in, and everything was the opposite of silence. How I got back. I guess these things don't like each other. When the meat blob fell into the black smoke, at first there was a blinding light. I can't describe the color. It was beyond white. That's all that comes into my mind when I try to recall what it looked like. Beyond white is the best I can do. With the light came the noise. It was deafening. The sound of flies buzzing so loud I couldn't hear myself scream. I was lucky to open my eyes quickly enough to see the black smoke rocketing up towards me. Quickly threw myself back against the wall as the smoke shot up past me and continued on upwards, filling the central column. I admit it took me longer than I'm proud of to regain control of myself. The light, the noise, the powerful wind from the rush of smoke. It was almost too much. I felt the smoke glaring at me. It was angry. It wanted to eat, but it was hurt. If I was more of an action hero, I would maybe do something with that information. But I'm not. So I ran. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could. I ran through the door marking floor 3. I ran through the halls, following the signs for the BHU, thanking whatever power above that all these doors were unlocked. I crashed through the twin doors leading back to where this all started. I collapsed onto the floor, finally feeling some semblance of safety. I don't know how long I was out for. I only realized after I woke up. All the doors that were unlocked, they all locked behind me as I ran. Now I'm stuck here again. It's been a few days, and I'm alone. Gerald's still here, of course, still strapped down. He's a little more than skin and bones now, but he's still moving. Water's still cold, window's still broken, smoke still follows me, food still rolls down the hall towards me. I did learn something through all of this, though. The realization of false hope is more damaging than no hope at all. So for now, I'll just live here with no hope of getting out. I'll be okay. That's the whole story. Pretty creepy if you ask me. When I was cleaning up earlier today, I noticed the ceiling was smudged with long black smoke stuff. Windows were cracked, with one window leading to an access hatch broken open. In the solitary holding room, I guess that's what they call the quiet room, there was one bed with its straps still tied down. Nothing on the bed, though. Few of the rooms had linen that were completely stained with something. Honestly, couldn't tell you what. Walking through the hospital, I also noticed a lot of stains on the floor. I can't say for certain, but I've had to clean up dead bodies before, and the stains in the hospital looked exactly like the kind of stains a body leaves when it's left to rot for a long time. After reading that, and comparing what happened in the journal with the kind of mess I found, I'm honestly considering calling out tomorrow. Maybe even just calling out for however long it takes to finish cleaning the hospital. After high school, having no better ideas, I joined the Navy SEALs. I never really liked any of it, but it was a job, after all. I love the guns, the airplanes, the grenades, but having to run all the time while some scumbag with a chip on his shoulder yells in your face isn't my idea of fun. Things got a lot more interesting after my term of service ended. I still had a high security clearance, so I used it to take temporary jobs as a mercenary, hired gun. I did some stints in Iraq with Blackwater, where they sent me out in the middle of the desert. A watchtower, an oil refinery looming over the burning sands. Along with a few other guys, they told us, guard the area with your life. While better than the SEALs, working for Blackwater was extremely boring. The other mercenaries and I would mostly just chain smoke cigarettes and drink coffee all night, staring out across the dead, empty desert. Over time, I worked my way up. Things started to get more interesting when a job offer arrived in my email one afternoon. This is what it said. Mr. Chase, I am the head of security for a private group of entrepreneurs and investors. Through some mutual contacts, I've heard of your professionalism and experience. We're currently putting together a small crew of guards for a private event on Redacted Island out in the Pacific Ocean that will run from January 9th to January 27th. Would you be interested in this job? The pay rate is $900 a day. Once you're on the island, it will be impossible to leave until the period of employment has ended. If you're interested, please respond to this email as soon as possible. Sincerely, Mario Antonin, Head of Security. I'd worked jobs like this from time to time, but none of them were paying that well. At most, I would usually get $350 to $500 a day, which was still good money when I was working 7 days a week, till the job finished. I instantly responded and said yes, I was interested. In response, they sent me a non-disclosure agreement that was the size of a small novel. That was how I found myself on a private jet, flying out to an island in the middle of the vast blue sea. I was never told the coordinates of the island, or saw it on a map. It was all kept very secret. A few hours later, we landed on a private airstrip. I looked out the window of the jet, seeing the tropical waters of the Pacific Ocean, stretching off to the horizon in every direction. Below me stood an island with palm trees and sandy white beaches. An enormous Victorian mansion loomed directly in the center of it all. The mansion was painted black and looked like something straight out of a horror movie. It had no windows, and the turrets spiraled up into blade-like points. That was my first inkling that something might not be quite right about this trip. As the stairs to the private jet descended, I looked out on this strange new world. Employees waited to greet us, looking like beaten dogs. Some had their heads down, their eyes blankly scanning the ground. Most of them were women wearing red dresses, reminding me of stewardesses on the plane. The jet strip was surrounded by palm trees and tropical brush. The chirping of insects sounded all around us, high and resonant. I saw a strange patch engraved on all the employees' uniforms. It looked like a stick figure drawing of a man, the bottom of his body ending in a C. Its arms were long and jointed, almost spidery. 3 symbols, like repeating iron crosses, connected the left side of the body in the line. I wondered if it was the logo of some company. I put it out of my mind for now, but I'd see that symbol again all over the island, painted on the side of the mansion, and even cut into the trees with a knife. It would only be later that night that I realized its connection to Moloch. "Good day, sir, and welcome to the island," the server on my left said, with glassy eyes and a fake smile. They all looked up at once, but it was like the workers all looked through me rather than at me. Their eyes looked flat and dead, like painted-on doll's eyes. "The island, huh? They wouldn't tell us where we were going. They said it was a secret. Is that what you call it?" The woman just nodded, the doll-like smile never leaving her face. "Officially, this island is unnamed and uninhabited," the woman said. "In fact, all traces of it have been scrubbed from the internet. You won't find it on Google Maps or any other publicly available satellite imagery." She leaned forward towards me with heavily mascaraed eyes and ruby red lipstick splashed across her lips. "This is a very special place. Only very special people are allowed here. We should be honored to work here under our Savior." "I hope you're talking about Jesus or something," I said jokingly. She just smiled blankly and motioned me forward. "Just follow the trail for a few hundred feet," she said, pointing at an opening in the palm trees where logs were laid down horizontally over the muggy jungle, "and you'll find the mansion. Good luck." I thought it was somewhat of a strange thing to say, wishing a random stranger luck. By the end of the night, I realized that simply to make it off the island alive, I might need that luck. I followed the woman's directions to the back of a brutalist mansion. A heavy metal door stood there with a small bulletproof window atop it. A tan Spanish face glowered out at me, then rapidly drew back and disappeared. A few heartbeats later, the door slid to the side on a gliding of hidden gears. The head of security at the island was a heavily tattooed ex-Marine named Mario. He wore a dark Kevlar vest over his black outfit, making him look like a walking shadow. I found the security had their own private complex in the mansion, as he showed me around the site. Hundreds of hidden cameras covered every angle of the mansion, and the surrounding parts of the island, too. Dozens of black-clad security agents swarmed over the screens, checking monitors and computers constantly. "Quite a setup you've got here," I said to Mario, nodding at him. He smacked me on the shoulder, giving me a confident grin. "Money's no issue here, Richard. Security is paramount. There are things on this island that could rip apart the world, if ever they escaped." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Nuclear weapons or something?" I asked, with a laugh. "You'll see for yourself later," he said, his dark eyes flashing with something cold and alien. Mario led me in a couple of the new hired guns around the island. The place was certainly strange. It reminded me of some combination of secret black ops site and a playboy billionaire's private heaven. All the doors in the mansion looked like they were made of thick steel. They had wheels that would spin, like those on a submarine. The mansion also had no windows at all, at least none that I could see, except for the small shatterproof glass openings on the steel doors. I didn't want to ask too many questions, however. Couldn't resist asking him a couple of small things, though. At least, they seemed small to me. "What are those hatchways?" I asked Mario, pointing to the rectangular covers built into the concrete walkways. They had heavy handles. Are those manholes or something? "They're tunnels under the island, just for maintenance and security, you understand." "Wow, this place is certainly well developed," I said. We came out through a grove of palm trees. A stone walkway led down a white beach. Dozens of yachts were moored all across the shore, some of them looking like they must have cost hundreds of millions of dollars. "There's a lot of money and power here. That's why it's important you never talk about what you see here. There are people who control the world, the ones beyond the government and the media, not the elected officials who people see, but the actual power." "Like who? You mean the Rothschilds or the Suarezes?" I laughed again, a sarcastic grinding laugh that grated my nerves. "Trust me, the truly powerful ones don't even have public personas. If you know their names, then they're just one of the puppets." I just shook my head at that, and then asked the real question that had been bothering me since I arrived. "Who's the Savior?" I asked. "Is that some code name or something?" Mario froze in place. "He's the one who runs everything here," he whispered conspiratorially, looking around nervously. "But don't be mentioning that kind of shit here. You'll probably see him tonight anyway. He's the one who runs the show. He'll be on the stage in his normal outfit." By the end of the day, I was suited up like the rest of the security staff, wearing the pure black pants and shirt with the symbol of Moloch engraved over the heart. Hundreds of the world's most famous politicians, actors, businessmen, artists had gathered, streaming in the front gate with a lot of soft, quiet chatter. I stood by the open doorway of a side exit with my AR-15 and body armor, next to one of the other soldiers. They had also given me a sidearm. Every entrance or exit was manned by at least 2 armed men. The security at this place was some of the most intense I'd ever seen. Beyond the door, there were rows after rows of the most comfortable seats, all gathered in a semicircle around a massive stage made of pure mahogany. Blood-red curtains stood closed in front of the room, concealing their secret, for now at least. I heard the elites inside calling out their praise for Satan. I didn't want to look at the rows of high-ranking politicians, celebrities, influencers, and what have you, but my curiosity was high. I peeked around the corner of the stone archway, seeing the red curtains on the stage drawing apart. I saw one of my favorite actors standing in the front row, clapping excitedly and jumping up and down. The crowd cheered as a naked female strapped to an obsidian altar, lay there. She was beautiful, blonde, probably no older than 20, with the face of a supermodel. Her mouth was gagged, her arms outstretched like Jesus on the cross. Thin leather cords were tied around her wrists and ankles, biting deeply into the skin. Her eyes rolled wildly as she shook her head from side to side. She froze as her eyes met mine for a brief moment. I saw the pleading expression there, the mortal terror, the absolute horror. A man in a goat mask wearing black robes slunk out from the side of the stage, carrying a wavy silver dagger engraved with strange symbols. The crowd erupted into a primal roar of pleasure and excitement that sounded like it came from a monstrous mouth. "Worthy is the Lamb," the man in the goat mask screamed with electric amplification. He had a deep voice, as if he had rocks rolling around in his throat. The crowd roared and clapped. Scattered cries of "Hail Lucifer" and "Ah, Satan" echoed from the massive auditorium. "Hey, pay attention," the other security agent said at my side with a thick Finnish accent. He was a tall Scandinavian guy named Kolmek. "You're not getting paid to watch the show, new guy." I tried to rip my gaze away from the stage, but it held my attention with the obsessive horror. "The burnt bones of children and women have been offered to the Ancient Ones, to Moloch," the man on the stage said. "Under our feet, the burnt bodies of hundreds lay dreaming. This victim will be the 666th. Her body will bring about the genesis we seek, the direct experience of the divine held by the gods, by Lucifer and Moloch and Baal." The roaring of the crowd temporarily drowned out the electrified magnification of his voice. "Tonight, we will rip open the veil." I had stopped watching the show, instead staring blankly out at the beach and the palm trees. At that moment, another black-clad security agent came up to my partner, whispering something in his ear, then immediately disappeared, heading off back in the direction of the main security office. Kolomek shook his head grimly. "I'll be right back," he said. "Stay right here. Don't move from this door no matter what. And pay attention." I nodded and watched as he walked off in the same direction. I immediately took the opportunity to continue watching the ceremony. I'd missed something important, apparently. The woman now lay dead on the sacrificial table, a gaping hole in her chest. Blood spurted from the crater as the man in the goat mask held her beating heart grasped tightly in his hands, letting the blood stream down his naked fingers. The crowd cheered with a rising bloodlust and insanity. Most of them were standing, their eyes gleaming and wide with fanatical adoration. The entire spectacle reminded me of some kind of ancient Aztec ritual. As the woman's sightless eyes stared vacantly up in death, the man in the goat mask pulled out a can of gasoline. The clear liquid gurgled as he upended the canister over her pale, bloodless face, over her naked stomach and long legs. A moment later, he lit a match and dropped it. I heard the whooshing of the flames as they rose up. The crowd went deathly silent as they watched the rippling flames. The man in the goat mask began chanting in some strange language I had never heard before. Sounded Semitic, but I knew it wasn't Arabic or Hebrew. I felt something like electricity ripple through the air, almost like a feeling of falling pressure before a storm. I looked down at the hairs on my arms, seeing them rise up. I looked back up at the stage, and my eyes widened in horror. The flaming body of the sacrificial victim had started to morph before my eyes and the eyes of the crowd around me. The dripping, blackening flesh jumped up and down, as if there were rats trapped in her body trying to escape. There was a deafening hissing, as if 1,000 snakes were being burned alive. The dead woman's arms jerked up, the skin splitting open as if she had seams running along her skin. Something dark and muscular with curving black talons ripped its way out of the dead, burning flesh. Behind it, a head appeared with long, curving horns and eyes that spun with whirls of fire. It looked like the offspring of a bull and a demon. Its imposing body rose from the inferno, appearing like magic from the solid stone. It raised itself to its full height, looming over the crowd, the last of the woman's blood hissing and boiling away as her flesh dissolved into ashes. "Behold, Moloch rises!" the man in the goat mask screamed in fanatical joy. The crowd's cheering had stopped, though. Many of the faces in the crowd looked chalk white with terror. A bull god surveyed the crowd, its horns nearly scraping the ceiling 20 feet above the stage. At that moment, I knew death was on its way, with eyes of fire and a grin like a skull, ready to reap the field of human bodies. I heard running behind me, but I didn't dare turn away from the horrific sight. The last of the fire's embers died, sending up thin wisps of gray smoke that spiraled around the bull god's monstrous face. Moloch stood as still as a statue. If it weren't for one thing, I might have thought it was some sort of sculpture or an art project. He had 2 nostrils like a serpent's. As his great lungs inhaled, the smoke billowed in and out of his mouth and nose. Some of the people at the edge of the crowd had gotten up, hurrying towards the door. Moloch's head ratcheted to face them, his fiery eyes narrowing into slits. "Do not leave," the man in the goat mask pleaded. "Those who have fear are not worthy of life. Do not prove yourselves unworthy of life." As the first of the fleeing men and women got to within a few steps of the door, Moloch gave a primal roar. In a blur of strength, he reached down and ripped the blackened sacrificial altar off the stage. It ripped from the wood with a tremendous crack, like a bullwhip. He hurled the heavy mass of stone at those heading towards the opposite exit, the one I was guarding. I watched it curve through the air. The people started screaming and clawing to escape as it smashed down on their heads with a grating crash. I could feel the floor shake from where I stood outside. Blood exploded from their smashed bodies. I saw arms and legs jerking and seizing under the heavy stone, but within a few moments they slowed and stopped. Others were running towards the exit, but Moloch leapt off the stage in a blur. In a few bounding steps, he reached the pale, terrified faces on the outside of the threshold. His massive clawed hands came down. I heard bones shatter as blood sprayed my face on the wall. Bone splinters and pieces of brain exploded from the screaming bodies. I backpedaled, wiping my eyes, trying to get the blood off so I could see. No one had told me what to do in this situation. I didn't know if I was supposed to shoot that massive thing or if this was all just part of the show. "Richard," a familiar voice cried from behind me. Panic oozed from every word. I spun, seeing Mario and Kolomek standing side by side, their pupils dilated and their expressions grim. "We have a major problem." "I know," I said, holding my rifle tightly. I pointed behind me at the scene of rampant death and destruction. I'd seen bloodshed and war before, but this was different. The island itself seemed to feel it. The wind, which had been calm when I first arrived, now whipped the island in a fast circular motion. The breezes smelled of burnt matches and coppery blood. The static electricity, which had caused the hairs on my arm to rise, rippled over everything, with tiny blue flashes, increased in power by the second. "No, not Moloch," Kalak said, looking calmer than I felt. "The Savior lets Moloch thin the herd every year. It's Leviathan, the beast from the water. It smells the blood and is drawn from the depths of the ocean. We picked up the first blips on the radar a few minutes ago. When it gets here, it won't stop until everything is rubble. It'll kill everyone on the island. All security personnel must report to the South Beach immediately," a cool robotic voice cried out over hidden loudspeakers all over the island. The screaming from the auditorium had quieted behind me. I was afraid to look inside. "There it is," Kalmak said, his head jerking up as the emergency alert sounded. "It's time to fight," he said, motioning me to follow. We sprinted over curving trails of smooth logs between deadly quiet forests. All the insects and birds had gone silent. Ahead of us, the palm trees opened up onto the Pacific Ocean, but it was no longer a beautiful tropic blue. A black, swirling whirlpool, like an ulcerous wound, had opened up on its surface. It stretched hundreds of feet across, drawing closer to the shore by the second. Dead fish, sharks, dolphins, squids, even whales spun in the filthy dark water. 20 black-clad security agents waited for the three of us on the beach, their eyes wide, their faces pale with terror. Like myself, they all had AR-15s and Glocks with extra magazines for both. I guess the Glocks might be useful for blowing my brains out if it was a last resort, over being eaten by some hell beast, but I didn't think it would stop anything from another dimension. The clouds swirled overhead in a thick curtain as black as smoke. Flashes of blue lightning detonated every couple of seconds. Mario raised his hand, screaming over the roaring of the wind. Colomek stood by my side, his face grim and his eyes narrowed. "Your job is to fight off anything that tries to get on the island," Mario said, looking from one face to another with rapt attention. "Nothing can stand against high-caliber rifle fire. Shoot at the face and eyes when it comes up. We've dealt with creatures like this before, and they will retreat if you injure them badly enough." I had the sense of being fed a line of bullshit as my mind processed this. "What exactly is coming up?" one of the doe-eyed security men asked. He barely looked old enough to drink, a young, muscular hulk with a Marine Corps tattoo on his neck. "It is called Leviathan. Sometimes the ritual here and the smell of blood can draw strange things. Leviathan is one of those. We have encountered it before. Most important thing to remember is..." His voice was suddenly drowned out by the terrible cacophony that came from the center of the whirlpool. A screech like the detonation of a nuclear missile shook the ground. The ocean jumped and bubbled frantically. The beach heaved and creaked, the white sand disappearing in fissures that opened up like greedy mouths underneath my feet. I lost my balance, falling forwards. The screeching continued, rising into a primal roar. A green dragon head, the color of an infected wound, erupted from the surface of the thrashing water, rising up dozens of feet in the air. It had two enormous slitted eyes that dilated and constricted quickly, as if glowering down at us. The screeching abruptly stopped, the pointed mouth of the dragon slamming shut with a sound like a gunshot. Within moments, another cancerous green head shot up in a blur, its skin looking as hard as stone. Ridges that looked as sharp as swords ran the length of its reptilian skull, arcing over its eyes and pointed snout. More heads erupted from the ocean, until all 7 of Leviathan's heads loomed over us. Not one of us fired. Not one of us even seemed to breathe as we surveyed the beast across the no-man's land of white sand. The slitted eyes and yellowed irises of the 7 heads had a demonic hunger, a reptilian coldness. Far behind us, I heard a distant scream still echoing from the auditorium, where Moloch held sway. "Fire!" Mario cried. Instantly, a cacophony of gunshots exploded all around me. I jumped to my feet, scrambling up as the 7-headed dragon leapt forward. Thousands of gallons of salt water streamed down its massive body as it came up on the beach. Long black paws with bone-white talons shot out of the surging ocean, followed by a tapering tail like a water snake's. I brought the rifle up and emptied my magazine as fast as I could, pulling the trigger over and over as I aimed at the many slitted eyes of Leviathan. The bullets seemed to ping harmlessly off its hard obsidian scales, though. It scrambled onto the shore, its heads coming down in a blur, rows and rows of vampiric fangs gleaming dully in each of its mouths. One security agent was bit in half, the spurting stump of its lower body still standing for a long moment, even as the rest of the body disappeared down the throat of the dragon. Mario ran forward, slamming another magazine into his rifle and opening fire point blank. One of the heads came down in a blur towards him. Its great staring eyes exploded in a shower of blue blood and thick viscous fluid. The dragon's head pulled back, its mouth opening in a primal scream of agony. As I reloaded, I scanned the area around me, realizing that nearly half the security guys were either dead or critically injured. I backpedaled away, keeping my eyes on the dragon. It continuously drew forward, killing more of its enemies with every step. I turned and ran for the forest, the sounds of shattering bones and dying men ringing through the air with a sickening clarity behind me. Once I'd reached the borders of the trail, I heard Mario yell, "Retreat!" behind me. By that point, it was too late, though. "Hey, wait up," a voice whispered from behind me. I turned my head, seeing Colomac. Spatters of drying blood covered his face and uniform. As far as I could tell, none of it was his. "Mario's dead. They're all dead. We need to get out of here. We need to get off the island." "How?" "Find the Savior," he answered, panting and out of breath. "We must find him. He can get us out of here." "I don't even know what the guy looks like. He was wearing a goat mask." "You'll know him when you see him. His body is covered in scars, everything except his face. Stay close to me. We need to watch each other's back. It's our only chance of survival." A trail of twisted, broken bodies led from the mansion to the surrounding trails of the beaches. A decapitated woman with a solid gold necklace embedded with diamonds lay in front of me. It was strange on the island, the way oblivion and ineffable wealth coexisted side by side. Everything was deathly silent now, even in the mansion's auditorium. "Where's the Savior?" I asked through gritted teeth. I peeked my head into the auditorium, but nothing moved. Hundreds of smashed and bloodied bodies littered the floor. "He's around here somewhere," Colomac answered. He started circling the mansion, looking for signs of life. Colomac took the lead. As he turned a corner, an enormous black hand with sharp claws of fingers flitted towards us in a blur, wrapping itself around his chest. Colomac gave a strangled cry as it closed around him. I heard the bones crush as a spout of blood and gore flew from his mouth and nose, as if it were a toothpaste tube being squeezed. I backpedaled away as Moloch threw the twitching corpse aside like a discarded toy. It smashed into the wall of the mansion, exploding wetly. A human-shaped, bloody stain languidly dripping down the wall above Colomac's mangled body. Moloch slowly turned his head towards me, the fiery eyes flashing with hunger. He gnashed his fangs together, taking a step forward with legs the size and shape of tree trunks. With every step he took, I felt the ground tremble. "Stop!" I cried, moving away from the monstrous creature. "Why are you doing this?" "There is no why," he gurgled, his voice monstrous and inhumanly slow. "There is only power. The weak deserve to die. Only the strong are worthy of life." I raised my rifle in a last-ditch effort to save myself. Moloch saw it and started running towards me, every step crushing the paved walkway around the mansion into rubble and dust. I aimed for his eyes and nose, emptying the entire magazine as quickly as I could. The bullets smashed into Moloch's face. Dark red clotted blood dripped out of the wounds, writhing with maggots. Drops of it fell around me, landing on my hair and face. I felt the small larva twist all over my skin. Moloch's blood smelled nauseating, like some combination of stink bugs and rotting bodies. He slowed, giving a roar of pain. I turned to run in the opposite direction, but as I looked out in the direction of the beach, my heart dropped. Leviathan was moving in our direction, the giant dragon head looming over the trees. Quickly, it swept towards me, like a dark wind. "You will suffer for that, worthless slave," Moloch growled, wiping blood from his fiery eyes with his sharp talons. A sudden idea came to me. I ran in the direction of Leviathan. Moloch followed closely at my heels, only a few steps behind. Leviathan slithered towards us over the sand and trees, its enormous body undulating like a water snake's. I screamed at it incoherently. Its 7 heads snapped towards me. Its slitted eyes widened as it saw Moloch. I heard the crashing of Moloch's footsteps behind me, only feet away from crushing me into paste. His massive lungs heaved, breath coming quickly, exhaling the odor of sulfur and smoke. "Leviathan," Moloch growled in his demonic voice. "These are my tributes." Leviathan's dragon head looked straight up at the sun and screamed in response, their many voices rising and falling in a dissonant wail. As I sprinted into the trees, Leviathan and Moloch ran at each other, colliding with an ear-splitting crash. I glanced back, seeing Moloch ripping one of the dragon's heads off its neck with his sharp fingers. The head screamed as blue blood erupted from the stump. After a moment, the neck fell limply forward. The other dragon heads bit Moloch in a unified attack. They ripped deep holes in his shoulder and arms, snapping over and over like rabid dogs. As the two eldritch monstrosities attacked each other in a fierce battle, I lost sight of them, but the sounds of fighting echoed over the entire island, crashing like lightning. I felt like the survivor of an apocalypse. I couldn't find a single other living person on the island. Hundreds of crushed, broken, and decapitated bodies surrounded me. Over the cacophony of fighting, I heard a new noise, the whirring of a helicopter nearby. It was coming from the other side of the mansion. Frantically, I sprinted towards the other side, seeing a Black Hawk helicopter getting ready to land. A man in black robes sat in the pilot's seat, his green eyes gleaming as a wide smile spread across his face. I smashed my fist into the door over and over until he opened it. "Holy shit, you're still alive?" he asked. I hadn't seen this man before. He had a face like a Calvin Klein model, all sharp angles and high cheekbones, perfectly proportioned in every way. But his scalp looked melted and scarred, as if someone had thrown gasoline on his hair and ignited it. His eyes were stunted, twisted growths of scar tissue. His hands, too, were covered in deep, folding burn scars. Are you the savior?" I responded quickly. "Please get me out of here." "They call me that," he said wistfully. "The savior, yes, I guess I am. Get in." The savior stared at me with his strange green eyes, the color of swamps where monstrous things swam under the surface. "Some people just need to learn the hard way," he said. The helicopter took off into the dark night, covered with bright twinkling stars. "There is no great power without great responsibility, after all. Those of us who seek the Ancient Ones know it comes with a cost." I just stared out the window, gazing down at the countless mutilated bodies that littered the beach. Below us, the face of the bull stared up with eyes of fiery cyclones. The broken, still body of Leviathan lay at its feet. As we made it over the great waters of the Pacific Ocean, the bull god raised its hand and waved. At that moment, I thought I could almost see a hurricane of translucent souls circling around him, spiraling up into the sky. I never thought I'd dread waking up, but here I am, eyes squeezed shut, praying that when I open them, I'll see something, anything different. My name's Marcus Thomas, I'm 32 years old, and I'm trapped in a nightmare that I can't escape. It started like any other day. I remember it perfectly, every little detail. The smell of coffee brewing downstairs, the sound of Aisha humming in the kitchen, the warmth of the sunlight streaming through the bedroom window. I sat up, stretching, and glanced at the clock. 7:15 a.m., right on schedule. I padded downstairs, following the scent of breakfast. Aisha stood at the stove, her back to me, swaying slightly as she flipped pancakes. Her dark curls were piled up on her head, and she wore my old college t-shirt, the one with the hole in the sleeve that she refused to throw away. "Morning, beautiful," I said, wrapping my arms around her waist and planting a kiss on her neck. She laughed and leaned back against me. "Morning, sleepyhead. I was beginning to think you'd sleep through your alarm again." "Not a chance," I replied, reaching around her to snag a piece of bacon from a plate on the counter. "Can't be late today. Big presentation, remember? Aisha swatted my hand playfully. How could I forget? You've been stressing about it for weeks. We ate breakfast together, chatting about our plans for the day. Aisha had a busy schedule at the elementary school where she taught 3rd grade. I had my presentation to the board, which could lead to a big promotion if it went well. As I was finishing my coffee, Aisha glanced at her watch. Oh, I better get going. Parent-teacher conference this afternoon, so I need to get there early to set up. She stood, grabbing her bag and her keys. I rose to walk her to the door, as I always did. Knock 'em dead, babe, she said, stretching up on her toes to kiss me goodbye. You're gonna do great. Thanks. Have a good day. Love you, I said, squeezing her hand. Love you too, she called over her shoulder as she headed for the car. I watched her pull out of the driveway, waving as she drove. Then I went back inside to finish getting ready for work. The day passed in a blur of meetings and last-minute preparations. By the time my presentation rolled around at 3 p.m., I was running on pure adrenaline and caffeine. But it went well, better than I'd hoped, actually. The board seemed impressed, and my boss even hinted at that promotion as we wrapped up. I was on cloud 9 as I packed up my things, ready to head home and celebrate with Aisha. I pulled out my phone to call her, wanting to share the good news right away. That's when everything changed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice I didn't recognize answered it. Hello? Is this Marcus Thomas? My stomach dropped. Something in the woman's tone sent ice through my veins. Yes, this is Marcus, I replied, my voice suddenly hoarse. Who is this? Mr. Thomas, this is Nurse Reeves at Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about your wife, Aisha. There's been an accident. The world tilted on its axis. I grabbed the edge of the desk, knuckles turning white. What happened? Is she okay? The pause before the nurse responded lasted an eternity. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thomas. Your wife was brought in about an hour ago. There was a multi-car pileup on the highway. The doctors did everything they could, but I'm afraid she didn't make it. I'm so sorry for your loss. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering on the floor. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. I'd just seen Aisha this morning. We made plans for dinner. She was fine. She had to be fine. The next few hours passed in a haze. Somehow, I made it to the hospital. I remember the harsh fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell, the pitying looks from the staff, and then seeing her lying there so still, so unlike the vibrant woman I'd kissed goodbye this morning. I don't know how long I sat there, holding her hand, willing her to wake up, to smile at me once more, to tell me this was all a cruel joke. But she didn't. Eventually, a gentle-voiced doctor came to take me away, to discuss arrangements I couldn't begin to comprehend. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember climbing the stairs to our bedroom. Our bed, where Alicia would never sleep again. I just remember collapsing onto the mattress, still in my suit, and praying that when I woke up, this would all be a terrible dream. Sleep came, eventually, a blessed escape from the crushing weight of grief. And then I opened my eyes. The smell of coffee drifted from downstairs, sunlight streaming through the bedroom window. For one blissful moment, I thought my prayers had been answered. Then I heard it, Alicia humming from the kitchen. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding, the clock on the nightstand reading 7:15 a.m. Impossible. I scrambled out of bed, nearly falling in my haste to get downstairs, and there she was, Alicia, alive and well, standing at the stove in my old college t-shirt, flipping pancakes. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, glancing over her shoulder at me. "I was beginning to think you'd sleep through your alarm." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This was impossible. "Marcus?" Alicia's smile faded, replaced by concern. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I crossed the kitchen in 2 slides, pulling her into my arms so tightly that she let out a surprised oof. "Whoa, what's gotten into you?" she laughed, returning the hug. "Bad dream," I managed to choke out. burying my face in her hair, breathing in her familiar scent. A really, really bad dream. Alicia pulled back, cupping my face in her hands. Well, you're awake now. Everything's fine, okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, because suddenly I remembered I'd lived this before. Yesterday morning. The morning Alicia died. As we ate our breakfast, my mind raced. Had it all been a dream? Some kind of stress-induced hallucination? It had felt so real, so visceral, but here was Alicia, alive and well, talking about her parent-teacher conference as if nothing had happened. I tried to shake it off, the lingering dread, as Alicia gathered her things to leave, but as she reached for her car keys, panic seized me. Wait, don't drive today, please, I blurted out, grabbing her wrist. She frowned. What? Why not? I scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't make me sound insane. I have a bad feeling. Can you carpool with someone, or could I drive you? Marcus, I can't just change my plans at the last minute. I need my car for errands after work, remember? She studied my face, worry creasing my brow. Are you okay? That must have been some nightmare. I forced a smile, trying to appear calm. Yeah, sorry. I'm fine. Just be careful. I love you. I love you too, she replied, still looking concerned. Try not to stress too much about your presentation. You're going to do great. And then she was gone, just like before. I watched her pull out of the driveway, my heart in my throat. I spent the morning in a state of high anxiety, jumping every time my phone rang. But as the hours ticked by with no bad news, I started to relax. Maybe it really had just been a nightmare. My presentation went well, just as it had in my dream, memory. I wasn't sure what to call it anymore, so as I packed up my things afterward, I decided to call Alicia just to put my mind at ease. The phone rang twice, 3 times. Hello? Is this Marcus Thomas? Ice flooded into my veins. Same voice, same words. Mr. Thompson, this is Nurse Reeves from Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about your wife, Alicia. She's been in an accident. No. This couldn't be happening. Not again. What happened? I demanded, even though I already knew the answer. I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson. Your wife was brought in about an hour ago. There was an accident at the school where she works. A student parent became violent, and I'm afraid Alicia didn't make it. I'm so sorry for your loss. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But as I raced to the hospital, as I saw Alicia's still form once again, as I held her lifeless hand, I knew it was all too real. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the core that when I woke up tomorrow, it would all begin again. I don't know how many times I've lived this day now. 10, 50, 100, they've all blurred together in a nightmarish haze of grief and desperation. Each morning, I wake up at 7:15 a.m. Each morning, I rush downstairs to find Alicia alive, humming in the kitchen. Each evening, no matter what I do, I receive that dreaded phone call. I've tried everything I can think of. I've begged her to stay home. I've faked an illness, a family emergency. I've disconnected her car battery. I've slashed her tires. I've hidden her keys. I've called the school with bomb threats. I've tried to get it shut down for the day. Nothing works. If Alicia stays home, she dies in a house fire. If she can't drive, she takes the bus, which crashes. If the school closes, she goes to run errands instead and gets caught in a store robbery gone wrong. It's like the universe itself is conspiring to take her from me, over and over and over again. Today I decided to try a different approach. Instead of trying to keep Alicia home or safe, I'll stay with her all day. Maybe from there I can protect her. When she leaves for work, I follow in my car. She notices, of course, pulling over after a few blocks. Marcus, what are you doing? She asks as I approach her window, her voice a mix of confusion and concern. I need to be with you today, I say, knowing how crazy that must sound. Please, Alicia, trust me. It's important. She studies my face for a long moment and then sighs. Okay, get in, but you're explaining on the way. As we drive, I try to tell her the truth about the time loop, about her dying every day, about my desperate attempt to save her. Alicia listens silently, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, she says, Marcus, I think you need help. This isn't normal. Maybe we should go to the hospital instead of work. No, I said, making her jump. No hospitals. Please, Alicia, just let me stay with you today. If nothing happens, I promise I'll get help tomorrow. She agrees, reluctantly. We spend the day together at her school. I hover anxiously, scanning for threats, jumping at every sudden noise. Alicia's colleagues give us odd looks, but she makes excuses about a family situation. As the final bell rings, I begin to hope maybe this time it'll work out. Maybe I've finally broken the cycle. We're walking to her car when I hear the screech of tires. I turn to see a car careening towards us, the driver slumped over the wheel. Time slows. I reach for her, trying to pull Alicia out of the way, but I'm too slow. Always too slow. The impact throws us both. I hit the ground hard, my vision blurring. When it clears, I see her lying motionless a few feet away, a growing pool of blood beneath her. No, I whisper, crawling towards her. No, not again, please, not again. But it's too late. By the time the ambulance arrives, she's gone. I'm left once more with the certainty that tomorrow it'll begin again. The next day, I don't even get out of bed. What's the point? Nothing I do makes a difference. Alicia always dies, and I'm left alone with the grief. I hear her calling from downstairs, concern in her voice, but I can't face her. I can't watch her die again. Eventually, she comes up to check on me. Marcus, are you okay? I roll over, burying my face in the pillow. Go away, Alicia, please. The bed dips as she sits beside me, her hands gentle on my back. What's wrong? Talk to me. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. So I do. I tell her everything, my voice muffled by the pillow, about the time loop, about watching her die over and over, but the failed attempts to save her. When I finish, silence stretches between us. Then Alicia speaks, her voice trembling slightly. I don't understand what's happening, Marcus, but I believe that you believe it. And I'm here. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. I roll over, meeting her eyes. The love and concern I see there breaks something inside me. I pull her into my arms, holding her tight as sobs rack my body. We spend the day at home, talking, crying, trying to make sense of the impossible situation. As evening approaches, I grow increasingly anxious. Maybe it'll be different this time, she says, squeezing my hand. Maybe staying home was the answer. I want to believe her, but as the clock ticks towards the dreaded hour, a sense of the inevitable settles over me. At 4:17, exactly when the call usually comes in, there's a knock on the door instead. Alicia moves to answer it, but I hold her back. No, let me. I open the door to find two solemn-faced police officers. Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid we have some bad news. There's been an accident. I don't hear them, because behind them on the street I see a familiar figure, a man in a dark suit watching us. As our eyes meet, he smiles, a cold, cruel expression that chills me to the core. Then he turns and walks away, vanishing into thin air. I slam the door shut, my mind reeling. Who was that? What did it mean? But there's no time to ponder, because Alicia's on the floor, clutching her chest, gasping for air. Heart attack. That's what the paramedics say when they arrive. Nothing anyone could have done. As I watch them take Alicia's body away, that strange man's smile haunts me. For the first time, I wonder if there's more to this nightmare than I realize. The next morning, I wake up with a new determination. If I can't save Alicia, and God, it kills me to even think that, maybe I can at least find out why this is happening. I go through the motions of the morning, hugging Alicia tightly before she leaves. Then I set out to find the man in the suit. I drive around town, watching for him. Hours pass with no sign. As 417 approaches, I find myself near the park where Alicia and I had our first date. There he is, sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. I approach cautiously, my heart pounding. Who are you? Why are you doing this to me? He looks up, the same cold smile on his face. Ha, Marcus, I was wondering when you'd find me. You know my name? I know everything about you, Marcus. And Alicia. A chill runs down my spine. Are you... what? Are you God? The devil? The man's laughter rings out, harsh and mocking. Nothing so grand, I'm afraid. Think of me as an interested observer. Observer of what? I asked, my fist clenched at my side. He stands, brushing breadcrumbs off of his suit. Of you, Marcus. Of your pain, your grief, your desperation. It's all quite fascinating, really. Rage boils up inside me. I lunge at him, intent on wiping that smug smile off his face. But my hands pass right through him, like he's made of smoke. Now, none of that. We're just getting to know each other. Why? Why are you doing this? The man's smile fades, replaced by a look of cold curiosity. Why? Because I can. Because your suffering amuses me. Because I want to see how long it takes to break you completely. His words hit me like a physical blow. I stagger back, shaking my head in denial. No, this can't be real. You can't be real. Oh, I'm very real, Marcus. And this is very, very real. For you, at least. My phone rings. 4:17 p.m. I already know what I'm going to hear when I answer it. The man in the suit watches me, his head tilted in interest. Well, aren't you going to get that? I'm sure it's important news about dear Alicia. I want to run, I want to scream, I want to wake up from this nightmare, but I'm rooted to the spot, trapped in this moment of horror. As I raise the phone to my ear, the man in the suit begins to fade away, but his parting words echo in my mind long after he's gone. Sweet dreams, Marcus. I'll see you tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. The revelation of the man in the suit haunts me. Each day as I wake to the sound of morning routine, I'm torn between my desperate need to save Alicia and my burning desire to understand, to defeat this cruel entity that's toying with our lives. Today I decide to ignore him completely. I focus all my energy on Alicia, determined to find some way, any way, to break the cycle. Let's run away, I blurt out over breakfast. Alicia pauses, fork halfway to her mouth. What? Let's just go, right now. Get in the car and drive until we can't anymore. She studies my face, concern etching lines around her eyes. Marcus, what's going on? You've been acting strange for days now. I take her hand, willing her to understand. Please, Alicia, trust me. We need to leave, now. Maybe it's the desperation in my voice, or maybe it's the love that's carried us through 7 years of marriage. Whatever the reason, Alicia nods. Okay, well, let's go. We throw some clothes in a bag and hit the road. As we drive out of town, I keep glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man in the suit following us. But the highway behind us remains clear. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, I begin to hope. We drive for hours, putting miles between us and the town where Alicia has died 100 times. We laugh, we sing along to the radio, we reminisce about old road trips. As the sun begins to set, we pull into a small coastal town. "Let's stay here tonight," Alicia suggests, pointing to a quaint little bed and breakfast. I check my watch. It's 6:43. We made it past 4:17, past the time Alicia always dies. "We did it," I whisper, tears prickling in my eyes. "We really did it." Alicia squeezes my hand. "Did what, babe?" Before I can answer, a commotion down the street catches my attention. A crowd is gathered, pointing at something in the sky. "Is that a plane?" someone shouts. "It's flying awfully low." My blood runs cold. No, it can't be. The roar of engines fill the air. I grab Alicia, trying to pull her to safety, but it's too late. The plane crashes into the bed and breakfast in a deafening explosion of fire and debris. In the chaos that follows, the screaming, the sirens, the frantic attempts at rescue, I search desperately for my wife. Deep down, I already know. As I stand there, watching the firefighters battle the blaze, I feel a presence beside me. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" The man in the suit asks, his tone conversational. "That you could outrun fate?" I don't look at him. I can't look at him. Why? Why her? Why us? He shrugs, the moment visible from the corner of my eye. "Why not? Your pain is exquisite. Your love, your desperation, your growing madness, it's all so deliciously human. I'll stop you. Somehow, I'll find a way." His laughter's like broken glass. "Oh, Marcus, I do hope you try. It'll make this game so much more interesting." I wake up the next morning with a new plan. If I can't save Alicia by changing her fate, maybe I can save her by changing mine. I go through the motions of our morning routine one last time, savoring every moment with her. As she leaves for work, I kiss her deeply. "I love you," I say. "Always remember that." She smiles, a little puzzled. "I love you too. You sure you're okay?" I nod, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. Have a great day, babe." As soon as she's gone, I start gathering supplies. Rope, a chair, a notepad. I write Alicia a letter, pouring out everything, the time loop, the deaths, the man in the suit. I tell her how much I love her, how sorry I am I couldn't save her. I beg her to live a full, happy life. Then I prepare the noose. Just before 4:17, I position myself on the chair. My plan is simple. If I die first, maybe the loop will break. Maybe Alicia will live. As I stand there, heart pounding, the man in the suit appears. My, this is certainly a new approach. "Go to hell." "You first," he smiles, cold and cruel. I take a deep breath, close my eyes, and step off the chair. The rope pulls tight, and I wake up gasping, back in bed. 7:15 a.m. Another failed attempt. But something's different this time. There's no smell of coffee, no sound of Alicia humming downstairs. I rush to the kitchen, my heart in my throat. It's empty. It's cold. "Alicia!" I call out, panic rising. "Alicia, where are you?" "She's not here, Marcus," a familiar voice says from behind me. I whirl to find the man in the suit lounging in my armchair, looking utterly at ease. "What did you do? Where is she?" He examines his nails, the picture of casual indifference. "I didn't do anything. You did." "What are you talking about?" He sighs, as if explaining to a particularly slow child. "You changed the rules, Marcus. You died first. So now She never existed. The world spins around me. I grab the counter to keep from falling. No, bring her back, please. I can't bring back someone who was never born, he says, standing. But don't worry. I'm sure we can find a new way to continue our little game. As the truth of what I'd done sinks in, I slid to the floor, a scream of anguish tearing up my throat. The man in the suit watches, a small, satisfied smile on his face. Well, shall we begin again? He asks, straightening his jacket. The world fades to black, and I brace myself for whatever fresh hell awaits. Because now I know the truth. There's no escape, no way to win, just an eternity of loss and pain, and the cruel smile of the man in the suit. But as consciousness returns, something feels off. The bed beneath me is harder than usual. The air smells different, antiseptic, sterile. I open my eyes to find myself in a hospital room. Machines beep steadily around me, and there, holding my hand, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, is Alicia. Oh my God, Marcus, can you hear me? I try to speak, but my throat is dry, raw. Alicia holds a cup of water to my lips. What happened? You've been in a coma for 3 months. There was an accident on your way to work. The doctors, they weren't sure you'd ever wake up. My mind reels. A coma? Was it all a dream? The time loops, the deaths, the man in the suit? As if summoned by my thoughts, I see a flicker of movement by the door. The man in the suit stands there, watching. But this time, his smile doesn't seem cruel. It's almost approving. He nods once, then vanishes. Marcus, are you okay? Alicia asks, her voice pulling me back. Should I call the doctor? I look at her, really look at her. My beautiful, vibrant, alive wife. Whatever happened, whatever was real or not real, none of it matters now. I'm okay. Everything is okay, I say, squeezing her hand. As Alicia calls the doctor, I close my eyes, savoring the feeling of her hand in mine. I don't know if I've won, lost, or simply been released from some cosmic game, but I do know one thing. I'll never take a single moment with Alicia for granted again. I woke up on my couch this morning, and the first thing I noticed was the piercing headache that comes from a horrible hangover. Then I acknowledged that waking up on my couch, with the obvious signs of heavy drinking, instead of doing it in my bed with my wife peacefully sleeping beside me, was not exactly encouraging. So as I got up and went to clean myself up, I tried my best to remember everything that had taken place last night. As soon as I did, I felt guilty. My wife Sophia and I had a heated argument that ended when I eventually passed out on my couch from all the alcohol I had consumed. As soon as I stepped into our room, I noticed that she wasn't asleep on the bed like I had expected her to be. There was no sign of her, actually. No phone, no shoes, no purse, or any of her clothes hanging around the room. Nothing. Figured that maybe I had woke up too late and thought she had simply went out to grab lunch with friends. This theory was quickly buried when I checked the time on my phone. It was 9:20 a.m. This shook me up quite a bit. I didn't know where she was or what she was doing at this hour after drunkenly telling her the most insulting and degrading things I could think of. Do you see where this is going? She could have spent the night revenge fucking some random loser for all I know. At that moment, I wanted nothing more than to hug her and apologize for all the horrible things I had said to her. The guilt I was feeling was only worsened when I noticed her profile picture was missing from my contacts app, meaning she either removed it or had blocked me. The latter seemed like the most likely of the two options, as ever since we met, she had always kept the same picture of her and her twin sister Cassie. I figure I needed to clear my head before doing anything stupid, so I decided to step into the bathroom and take a shower. As soon as I did, I let out a huge sigh of relief when I saw a sticky note attached to the mirror. Hey Alex, I'm really sorry about last night. I know I was acting like a total maniac and provoked you into saying things you didn't mean. I want you to know that I'm not mad at you and that nothing is wrong. I just went out to the beach to take a walk on the shore. I would have told you all this in person, but it seemed you were pretty passed out, and I didn't want to wake you up. Anyway, I'll be back soon. Love you. I smiled as I picked up the note and read it. I couldn't help but think, though, that despite this obvious sign that it was just me overthinking the whole situation, something still felt wrong. I brushed it off and proceeded to take a nice, long, hot shower. Felt a lot better as soon as I stepped out. My hangover was improved significantly, and the stabbing sense of guiltiness was almost gone. I got dressed and quickly tried to call Sophia, but it went straight to voicemail. This just made that lingering sense of worry suddenly reawaken itself. Then again, the beach had pretty much no signal, so I didn't worry about it too much and decided not to act immediately. Big mistake. Minutes turned into hours as I desperately waited for her to arrive. All I could think about was her long, shiny blonde hair and her beautiful blue eyes. I soon realized it had been 4 hours since I picked up the note she'd left, which meant that she'd been away for a lot longer than that, since I had no idea when she'd left. She never spent that much time on the beach. So at about 1:30, I decided to leave my house and go look for her. I ran into my good friend Max on the way to the beach. He told me he had just left the surf shop and how excited he was about working on a custom board for one of his clients. He quickly noticed I wasn't exactly matching his energy and seemed pretty worried, asking me if anything was wrong and how he could help. That was classic Max. He was always there for his loved ones. He'd stick with you through thick and thin, no matter what. That's why I was really glad I had ran into him on this particular day. I needed that kind of support, now more than ever. I quickly explained the situation to Max, and his typical massive smile gradually turned into a serious expression as I let out my concern. He took a deep breath before speaking. Okay, I would have thought she'd just stay mad and crash somewhere, but that note really complicates everything. Maybe she actually is still mad at you and still crashed somewhere, but she left you that note so you wouldn't come looking for her. I wouldn't worry too much, man. She's probably at one of her friends' house talking shit about you right now. But that's how it goes with her, man. She's a drama queen. She wouldn't just leave you without a big final face-to-face, right? What he said did make sense, but it still had me worried. Yeah, exactly. She wouldn't just leave without saying anything. That's why I'm worried. What if she actually came here and something happened to her? Well, in that case, I'm here to help you look for her. Although, I really don't think she's been kidnapped or anything. That's insane. Trust me, she's probably at someone's house enjoying some time away from her psychotic husband. He let out a soft chuckle, but quickly turned serious again when he saw his joke hadn't amused me. Look, man, if you want to help me look for her, I really appreciate it. If not, don't get in my way, I said with a stone-cold expression on my face. Roger that, he said, and quickly ran back towards the surf shop. I assumed he was choosing the latter of the two options I gave him, and scoffed quietly as I arrived at the beach. I was mistaken. About 20 minutes after he left, I heard Max calling out for me. I was too focused on looking for any signs of Sophia to turn around immediately, but when I did, I was delighted to see my friend along with the entire staff of his surf shop making their way towards me. They were equipped with flashlights, binoculars, and even an automatic weapon, in case things went sour. I couldn't help but smile at the sight before me, and greet my friends with a hug. We wasted no time and immediately split up into 4 groups, walking around the beach and asking every pedestrian if they'd seen a blonde-haired woman in her mid-20s. We were met with mostly negative answers, until the sun started to set and our hopes of finding Sophia slowly disappeared with it. Before I knew it, it was already 7 p.m. We'd been asking around for any signs of my wife for more than 5 hours, and most of Max's team were starting to lose hope entirely. One of them suggested we call our search, and instead file a missing persons report with the local police. I stubbornly refused, noting that the local police are extremely incompetent, and missing person reports always lead to nothing. But deep down, I knew that was my best bet. Max quickly said, I agree with Alex. The police won't do anything to help us. But Detective Hoffman might be a different story. I'll call him right now. I was confused by his statement. However, it gave me hope. Whoever this Detective Hoffman guy is, he could really help us right now. At least, help us more than the police would. Max quickly explained to me that Detective Hoffman is the client he talked about earlier. He was shopping for a birthday present to give his son, and a custom surfboard from Max's shop was what he chose. Max told me that they had become great friends, which by his standard most likely meant that they were mild acquaintances. But whatever kind of friendship they had was irrelevant. What mattered was that this guy was a trained detective who also worked as a private investigator. After a short phone conversation with Max, he agreed to help me find my wife in exchange for a hefty discount on his custom board. I was so thankful that Max actually agreed to this, but hey, that's Max for you. Detective Hoffman and I got in touch as soon as he ended his conversation with Max. We agreed to meet at my house the same night, so I said goodbye to Max and his crew, thanking them and especially Max for all their help. I quickly made my way back home. I still had a sliver of hope in me that as soon as I walked in the house, Sophia would be right there waiting for me. Of course, that wasn't the case, but my disappointment was short-lived as about 10 minutes after I arrived, I got a knock on the door from Detective Hoffman. I opened the door and greeted a tall but slender man into my home. He gave me a firm handshake and asked if he could come inside. I showed him in, and he immediately took off his large black trench coat to reveal a minimalist yet elegant white shirt and red tie. He made his way into my kitchen and asked me if I had any bourbon. I was a bit shocked by his confidence. Usually I would be the one offering booze to my guest. I didn't have bourbon, but I did have half a bottle of scotch left, so I offered it to him and he gladly accepted. I took out 2 glasses and handed them to him. He served a generous amount of brown liquor for both of us, put them on the kitchen table, and invited me to sit down. Again, his confidence was definitely a bit shocking to me, and I definitely could have mistaken it for arrogance. I decided to keep these thoughts to myself, though. The only thing that mattered to me was finding Sophia. Listen, Alex, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I need you to be 100% honest with me if you want us to get anywhere. Understood? Yeah, I understand. Fantastic. Now I want you to know that we have a confidentiality agreement in place, meaning anything you say cannot legally be shared to anyone. Understand? Yeah, I understand, I replied, definitely getting a bit nervous when he asked me that. I was afraid of what he might ask next. Did you murder, attempt to intimidate, or physically or psychologically harm Sophia Adkisson? I was lost for words, froze up. This Sherlock Holmes doppelganger thinks I killed my own wife. No, of course not. How dare you even suggest something like that in my own home? I can't begin to explain how. No need to get defensive, Alex. I just need to have a full understanding of the situation so I can make an informed decision on how to proceed. I'm not suggesting anything. Tell me about Sophia. Did you notice any change in character in the days leading up to her disappearance? Did she show any signs or desires to terminate your relationship? Is she closer to any of her relatives or friends than she is to you? I thought for a few seconds and then began to tell him about our big fight. I was drunk and thought it would be somehow acceptable to demand she stop seeing her twin sister Cassie so often. I hate to admit that I was jealous, but I was. I was jealous that my wife was spending so much time with her sister. God, I was such an idiot. I told Hoffman about Cassie. They were extremely close, but oddly enough, I never got to spend much time with her. Sure, I knew who she was, and I'd seen her around sometimes, but I never got the chance to properly introduce myself to her. The closest I ever got was at my wedding, when she congratulated me and Sophia, and we exchanged a few words of gratitude, but that was really it. I was bothered by the fact that my wife spent so much time with someone who was practically a stranger to me, even though I had absolutely no right to feel that way, since they had literally known each other since birth. I understand. Do you happen to know where this individual resides at? Yeah, she lives about 4 blocks away. I didn't entirely understand the purpose of Hoffman's question, but I felt certain he would elaborate. Good, good. I'd like to speak with her immediately. I'll wait for you outside by my vehicle. He quickly stood up and grabbed his trench coat before stepping outside. I was a bit shocked by this, but I remembered my goal of finding Sophia, so I followed behind him and made my way to his black SUV. The drive over to Cassie's house was quiet and rather uncomfortable, but as soon as we got there, he handed me some sort of tape recorder and a pair of earphones. I'm going in alone, but I need you to listen carefully to everything she says. Try and make connections between anything you learn and everything you already know. But I need you to stay cool and composed, Alex. I will pressure her heavily, So it's more than likely that Cassie will disclose some information that's new to you. But no matter how angry it makes you, you have to stay here, and you have to stay focused. Understand? This shook me up a lot. I was not ready to find out what Sophia had been hiding from me, but I was certain that I was going to hear it anyway. Hoffman is intimidating, to say the least, and I just know that if there's truly a big secret that Sophia had trusted Cassie with, Hoffman would be able to get it out of her with ease. I observed anxiously from the vehicle as Hoffman made his way to Cassie's house. It was 8:21 p.m. when he gave the door 4 firm, loud knocks. He was about to knock for a 5th time when a short, blonde-haired woman greeted him with a confused expression on her face. "Good evening, Miss Atkinson. My name's Detective Mark Hoffman, and I'm here to ask you a few questions regarding the disappearance of your sister, Sophia Atkinson. Can I come in, or would you prefer I take your statement from outside your residence?" That was a sneaky trick by Hoffman. Casey wasn't legally obligated to tell him anything, but his concise and confident demeanor would make her think she was. I told you, this guy was good. Sure, Mr. Detective. Please come in." Hoffman took a glance at me in the car before calmly walking into Casey's house. I heard a loud beep noise coming from the tape recorder-esque device that he had handed me a moment before. He just activated a wireless microphone hidden in his tie. The door closed and my visual presence was gone, but thanks to that little microphone, I could still hear everything that was going on inside that house. "Wow, okay, I didn't even know she was missing before you came here. When did this happen?" she asked, genuinely terrified. God, her voice sounded just like Sophia's. "I'm not sure you understand the dynamic here, Miss Atkinson, but I'm here to ask you some questions, not answer them." "Oh, I understand, Mr. Detective. Sorry, how can I help you?" "Think of this as an interview. Whatever you say won't help or hurt anyone but yourself. So I would advise you to answer each of the following questions honestly and to the best of your knowledge. Understand?" "Yes, Detective. I'm sorry." I couldn't help but feel bad for Casey. The girl was probably relaxing in her bed, and suddenly she learned that her sister was missing, and that she was considered somewhat of a suspect. Or at least, that's how Hoffman made it seem. She sounded so scared and vulnerable. "Please, take a seat." Yes, sir." "Miss Atkinson, do you consider Mr. Alex Davis a friend of yours?" I felt a chill run down my spine when I heard my name being mentioned. Well, sort of, yeah, I mean, he's my sister's husband. Obviously, I care about him and stuff, but we're not, like, super close friends or anything. Did he do something to Soph?" "It's a yes or no question, Miss Atkinson. Shall I repeat it for you?" Hoffman shot the question back without even acknowledging her answer or her injury. No, I guess I don't consider him a friend," she said with as much composure as her voice was capable of. That stung. I mean, I could have probably guessed she'd say that. She'd probably also assume I had something to do with Sophia going missing. But it still felt bad. Hoffman just barely started, and I already wanted to step out of the car and go talk to her myself. This wasn't going to end well. "Did Sophia Atkinson show any sign of being mistreated by Mr. Davis?" "Not mistreated exactly, but she did on occasions express being unhappy with the state of their marriage." "What? What occasions? What the fuck was she talking about?" I wanted to go in there and find out more, but I stayed calm, just like Hoffman had told me to do. "Please go into detail about these occasions. What exactly did she feel unhappy about?" "Well, she sometimes talked about how Alex had a really bad temper, and I can assume he's probably an alcoholic from all the stories Sophia told me. She felt really upset whenever Alex drank more than he should have, because that's when he really lost his mind, according to her. That answer made me lose it. Why did Sophia talk to her about me? I was growing more and more impatient with every second that went by. I wanted to go in there so bad. And could it possibly be that Mr. Davis had one of his outbursts in the days leading up to Sophia's disappearance?" "Oh, definitely. It's more than possible. I think it's very likely, actually. He did have one of those outbursts quite often, according to my sister. I punched the glove box and gritted my teeth when I heard that. I knew it was true, but it hurt me more than it angered me." "Did Sophia ever consider ending their marriage, Miss Davis?" "Yes, on many occasions, but she expressed a concern for her well-being if she did. She was scared of what Alex might do afterwards." I sat there and seethed. What the hell? Cassie was literally turning me into the prime suspect of this case, with the guy I had hired right there. I couldn't sit here like an idiot and take this much longer. "Did Sophia have a backup plan, if you will, Miss Davis?" I didn't even want to hear what Cassie had to say about that. Sort of. She was going to meet up with a painter she met on the beach. That was supposed to happen a few days ago, but she canceled on him. She told me she just couldn't do that to Alex, and she felt super guilty later. I was simultaneously relieved and completely enraged when I heard the answer. What painter? How could Sophia even consider cheating on me with some fucking painter? And a painter she had met on the beach, for God's sake? Probably some junkie who makes $2 an hour selling his shitty drawings to people who just feel bad for him. But at least she came to her senses, right? Please elaborate on this painter individual. What is his name and where does he reside? His name is Jamie. I can't seem to remember his last name, though. Maybe she didn't even mention it to me. As for the second question, I have no clue where he lives. But he works at the beach in a big blue tent by the main bar. Fucking loser, I whispered to myself. To the best of your knowledge, how did Jamie feel about Sophia canceling their date? He didn't take it well. From what I know, he tried to get in contact with Sophia a lot. She even blocked his number and started calling him from a different phone. It got really bad, so bad that Sophia had to change her number to avoid him. She lost all of her contacts because of this. Oh, that explained the whole missing profile picture thing. I wasn't sure how to feel. And did he try to contact Sophia in person? Maybe show up at her house on occasions? I don't know, but it wouldn't shock me if he did. And could a face-to-face confrontation between the two of them have led to Jamie harming Sophia in any way? Gosh, maybe. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Oh my God. Casey sounded worried when she said that. I should have been worried too in hindsight, but then and there I felt like I was losing my damn mind. I wanted to have a chat with this Jamie guy, maybe even stab him to death and throw his body in the ocean. That's all I've got for you, Miss Atkinson. Thank you very much for your time. No problem, Detective. Let me know if there's anything else I can do to help. It sounded like Hoffman was making his way out of Casey's house, and sure enough, I saw him walk out with a blank expression on his face and start to walk towards me in the car. He stepped back in and began to drive back to my house, without saying a word. It was now 9:08 p.m. When we arrived, he gestured for me to unlock the door, and as soon as I did, he walked inside, no hesitation, and made his way to my kitchen to pick up a still full glass of whiskey and down it in one gulp. I'm really nervous about this Jamie guy. He gives me the heebie-jeebies. That was the most informal thing Hoffman had ever done and said since I met him. I quickly snapped back to my senses and replied, "Yeah, Detective, I feel the same way. I want to kill that guy right now." "Don't worry, I do too. I would go over and question him right now, but it's late, and I imagine he's probably gone. First thing tomorrow, I'll pay him a visit in his little tent." It seemed the alcohol had really loosened Hoffman up. I thanked him for his help and wished him a good night. He then firmly shook my hand and handed me his business card. I realized I didn't even have his number yet, and I had contacted him through Max's phone. But that issue was now resolved. He made his way out of my house. "Thanks for the drink, by the way. Take care of yourself, Alex. I'll see you tomorrow." Then he stepped into his car and was gone. Wow, a cop drinking and driving. I never thought I'd see that. I waved him goodbye and closed the door. I immediately collapsed onto the couch and started crying in a rage. Whoever this Jamie guy was, and whatever he looked like, I was gonna fuck him up. In the middle of my breakdown, I decided to call Max. He almost instantly picked up, and we shared a short but meaningful conversation. "Hey bro, how'd it go with Hoffman? Man, that guy is a complete badass, isn't he? I imagine you already figured that out, though. Did you figure out what happened to Soph?" His demeanor did a complete 180 when he heard I was still weeping with tears of rage. "Oh shit," I heard him whisper, his tone terrified. I told him about Hoffman's chat with Casey, and especially about Jamie the painter. "Dude, I know that guy. He bought a few beanies and ball caps from my shop before." His tone was uncharacteristically enraged for Max. "What does he look like?" I desperately asked. "Not gonna look great after these fists get their hands on him, buddy." I urged Max not to do anything. Hoffman was going to go question him first thing in the morning, and that was final. Max sounded a little disappointed at me denying him the opportunity to beat Jamie's ass. But he was smart about it. He promised not to do anything directly, but he did say that he and his staff were going to keep an eye out for him. I didn't contest that, as I figured a few extra pairs of eyes couldn't hurt. I thanked him before hanging up, downing the glass of whiskey Hoffman had served me a few hours ago, and passing out on the couch. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was a text from an unknown number. "Good morning, Alex. It's Detective Hoffman. I have many things to share with you, but one is definitely more urgent than the rest. Please listen to the following audio files. The text had a 6-minute audio file attached, so I curiously grabbed a pair of earphones and started to listen. It seemed that Hoffman was interrogating someone. Mr. Jamie Watkins? Mr. Tall, Angry British Guy? I guessed that the last bit was Jamie's voice. Good morning, Mr. Watkins. My name is Detective Mark Hoffman, and I'm here to ask you a few questions regarding the disappearance of Sophia Adkisson. I could hear a light scoff coming from Jamie. Then he stayed silent for a few seconds before speaking again. I have no idea what you're talking about, Detective. Frankly, Mr. Watkins, I know that's not true. So I'm going to remind you that if you choose to lie again during this statement, you can and will be charged with misleading an investigation. Hoffman sounded like he was losing his cool a little bit, which was definitely out of character for him. And frankly, Mr. Detective, I'm not obliged to tell you anything, so I think I would rather have you stop wasting my time and stop drawing attention away from my work. Can't you see I'm working on a new piece here? God, you cops are such a pain in the ass. You are correct, Mr. Watkins. You are obliged to tell me nothing, though it may be in your best interest to tell me what you know. Hoffman angrily replied, and I could hear the sound of a handgun being rustled against his belt. He probably flashed the gun at Jamie in an attempt to intimidate him. I learned it clearly didn't work as soon as Jamie spoke again. Wow, yeah, that gives me even less reason to want to talk to you, and more reason to ask you to leave. If you do so right now, maybe I won't even tell your boss, Sheriff Stratham, that you literally just threatened me with a weapon. How does that deal sound, Mr. Marky Mark? I do not work under Sheriff Stratham, but thanks for the warning, Jamie. I imagine this would be an appropriate moment to disclose the fact that I've already gathered enough evidence to put you under arrest for kidnapping and possible murder. But hey, you should definitely continue to lie and provoke me. I wanted to believe Hoffman was lying when he said that. I just didn't want to believe it was possible that my Sophia had been kidnapped, much less murdered. Ha! Why haven't you arrested me yet then, asshole? Jamie sounded completely unbothered by the threat. Because I want to help you, Jamie. I can help you if you help me. Tell me what you know about Sophia's whereabouts, and I promise I'll make sure that you don't ever see the inside of a jail cell. Jamie stayed quiet for an uncomfortable amount of time, before he let out a light chuckle and said, All right, look, I was supposed to come over to her house one night when her husband was away, but then she rescheduled our little date to yesterday morning. I was speechless. I thought Sophia had canceled their date, but she met him the day she went missing? That was not looking good. Why would Cassie lie? Maybe she was being honest and Sophia lied to her about Jamie? Maybe it's fucking Jamie who's lying. I definitely wanted to believe the latter possibility. And did you see her yesterday morning, Mr. Watkins? Yeah, I did. We went on a trip to Malu Island to grab lunch and a few drinks. That's all I know, I swear. Malu Island was a small but beautiful section of land about a 20-minute boat ride away from the town. Please, go into further details about this trip, Hoffman said. Well, nothing sexual or even romantic took place. We met at the shore at about 8:30 and bought 2 tickets from Maru Island. We didn't really do anything major once we got there. We just talked for a while and shared a few drinks at the main bar when she suddenly stood up and went to the bathroom. That's the last time I saw her. She went to the bathroom at the bar and never came back? Hoffman asked with a distrustful tone. Yeah, she wanted about 20 minutes, and when I figured she just stood me up, I got up and left. Hoffman took a deep breath before speaking again. Let's talk about you for a second. Do you work here at the beach full time, selling your art? Is that your main source of income? Correct, Jamie said confidently. And where do you currently reside? I live in the trailer home just outside the area. It's maybe 10 blocks away from here. I'll write down the address. Very well, Mr. Watkins. I will not be taking any further questions from you at this time. However, I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other soon. The record ended with that. I felt more confused than enraged. Clearly someone was lying, and I desperately needed to know who. I guess I got caught up in this in my own head, because without really paying attention, I almost unconsciously grabbed for the bottle of scotch. Just as I was about to give in to my alcoholism, I was brought back to my senses by the sound of anxious knocking on my door. It was Max. My friend greeted me with one of his signature comfort hugs and quickly made his way to my kitchen as I closed the door behind us. Dude, I got some news and you're gonna want to hear it, he said as he opened my fridge and tossed me a beer can. I was curious to hear what he had to tell. Try to calm down, all right?
One of my cashiers, Jesse, told me just now that he saw that Jamie guy sneaking into his tent with a big black trash bag. It looked like whatever was in it, it was moving. I felt a chill run down my spine as I heard that. Could it be? Max and I devised a plan to catch Jamie red-handed. We were going to keep a close eye on him all day long, and when he finally decided he was done selling his drawings for the day, we were going to follow him in Max's car. The stage was set. Max and I were poised on the roof of his surf shop with a pair of binoculars in hand. And sure enough, there he was. He was lounging on a folding chair inside of his ever-so-charming blue tent with his paintings on display like they were the lost works of Da Vinci. I really can't understand why he was still there. It was 5:08 p.m., and by the look of it, every potential client of his already left the beach. Plus, it's not like anybody in their right mind would pay the ridiculous prices he was charging for his pieces of art. Maybe he didn't arrive at the beach so early and leave so late to sell his drawings. Maybe he did it to scout out victims, to get close to vulnerable people, without them suspecting anything. Maybe that's how he got my Sophia. I was lost in my thoughts when a firm tap on my shoulder brought me back to my senses. Max pointed towards the tent as he quickly jumped from the rooftop and unlocked his car. "Dude, look, he's leaving. Hurry the hell up or we're going to lose him." I quickly followed behind him and got in the passenger seat as fast as I could. Max started driving as soon as I'd closed the door, trying to keep an eye on Jamie's white van. He managed to get behind him without causing any suspicion, but I could tell Max and I felt equally as confused when, instead of turning right, away from the Bay Area and towards where the trailer homes he had told Hoffman about were, he took a left towards the wealthier side of town. We followed close behind as the white van made its way into an old garage, just outside of Springfield, the neighborhood home to the most luxurious vacation homes and most of the stunning apartment complexes in the area. We waited outside the garage for about 5 minutes, when suddenly Jamie drove out of the garage in an insanely over-the-top red sports car. It looked like something straight out of Grand Theft Auto. Max let out an audible gasp of pure shock. I instead stayed silent for a while as we followed that ridiculously expensive car. "Holy shit, how much do you think that thing's worth?" "I don't know, man. Like a couple of million at least. But the real question is, how the fuck did he pay for that?" "Maybe he stole it? I don't know. There's no way he paid for that. I mean, I've never seen anyone buy his shitty paintings." Max let out a soft chuckle in reply. "Dude, Alex, you're such a gullible goofball. I mean, it's obvious this whole painter thing is complete bullshit. This guy doesn't live in a trailer home, and he most definitely doesn't make a living selling those paintings on the beach. He's hiding something, and we're going to find out exactly what it is." But that doesn't make any sense. If you were a millionaire, why the hell would you pretend to be a junkie? Surely it would be the other way around, right? "Well, maybe he doesn't want people to know he's a millionaire." "But why? If I was a millionaire, I would be delighted to let people know. Why would anyone not want to take credit for that?" "That's exactly what we're here to find out, dude," Max said confidently. Earlier that day, before my friend and I had decided to go on this little investigation, I got a text from Hoffman. "Alex, I should tell you what I've been up to since our last interaction. I've decided that in order to eliminate all doubt regarding Mr. Watkins' supposed encounter with your wife, I had to investigate Malu Island. So I did, and I discovered absolutely nothing that could connect Mr. Watkins to the disappearance of your wife. Although on second thought, I think it would be convenient if you took a look for yourself. Perhaps the two of us should travel there tomorrow morning and give the island another sweep. But to be honest with you personally, I believe that the supposed encounter never took place there, or at least not in the way that Mr. Watkins described it to me. I can't describe how uncomfortable this individual makes me. I have really, really bad feelings about him. I'll pick you up at your house tomorrow morning, just after I pay our little friend another visit. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex. Take care of yourself." The red sports car finally stopped, pulling into the driveway of a home I would only describe as surreal. Imagine the kind of property that the Wolf of Wall Street would own if he never got caught by the FBI, and times it by 10. Jamie calmly stepped out of the luxury vehicle and watched as two muscular men dressed in tuxedos greeted him, and one of them proceeded to park the car in the home's private garage. All Max and I could do was watch in disbelief as the scene before us unfolded. The house had a meticulously designed security system. It was no joke. There were cameras everywhere, at least 20 other unnecessarily jacked security guards dressed in tuxedos, a massive electric gate, about 15-foot tall fence. Of course, because why not? There was a frigging sniper on the mansion's rooftop. It looked like a supervillain's hideout, straight out of a video game. After analyzing our situation, Max and I quickly figured out that our options were quite limited. We only had two, actually. Plan A, go home, or Plan B, die. Since we're not completely out of our minds, we decided to choose the first option and leave the investigation work to a professional, like our friend Detective Mark Hoffman, for example. We drove back to the surf shop and said our goodbyes for the day, with a bittersweet feeling. We basically had no progress, and we had made nothing towards finding Sophia. We were losing valuable time, and in this particular situation, it could be the difference between life and death. But hey, at least we didn't attempt to break into a deranged billionaire's house, right? When I finally got home, the loneliness hit me harder than it ever had. My wife had been missing for more than 2 days, and so far, all I've done about it is find out that she met up with a billionaire pretending to be a loser. She could be dead right now, or maybe she's still alive and in desperate need of some help. And yet here I am, at home, alone, doing absolutely nothing to help her. I tried to change that by calling Hoffman and explaining everything Max and I had seen. I also sent him some photos I took of Jamie's car and the house. To my surprise, Hoffman seemed quite unbothered by this. He assured me that he'll get something valuable out of Jamie tomorrow morning, and wished me a good night. I'm ready to do something about it. I'm ready to step up for Sophia. Tomorrow, Hoffman and I will investigate Malu Island, and I swear on Sophia's name that I will not go home empty-handed. I will find something that can allow Hoffman to legally search Jamie's home, and when it's over, she'll be right here, alive, and ready to finally come home with me. I miss her a lot. I actually woke up at a reasonable time for once. It was 7:30 a.m., and I was ready to finally do something meaningful. I'd called Hoffman the night before, and asked him if I could be present for the second interrogation of Jamie. I wanted to analyze everything about his demeanor, any signs of guilt in his body language, or manner of speech. I was going to notice it. Hoffman knocked on my door, and we decisively made our way into his black SUV. This made me reminiscent about the time he had interrogated Casey. The anxiousness and the uneasy feeling was exactly the same. I was excited to find out more about Sophia's disappearance, but absolutely terrified about what exactly I might find out. Hoffman broke the silence. Same thing as before. We'll use the same wireless microphone technology we did last time, and the rules are still the same. If I'm being honest, I have no idea what I'll be able to get out of Jamie, so please keep a cool head. This will either go extremely well or terribly wrong. Whatever happens, just stay here and do not leave the vehicle for any reason. Understood? Yeah, thanks, Detective. We pulled up to the beach, and Hoffman parked the SUV in a position that would give me a clear line of sight for the tent, but far enough away to keep the vehicle from raising any suspicions. Hoffman handed me the same tape recorder thing as before, and gave me a pat on the shoulder as he stepped out of his car. I think up to that point, I had never seen him nervous. Oh wow, look who decided to show up. My good old pal Sherlock Holmes. I missed you, buddy. What have you been up to lately? Jamie said with an infuriating grin on his face. Show's over, Watkins. I now have conclusive evidence of your little side job. Or side life, I should say. I imagine you wouldn't like it too much if that got out, would you? You'd probably lose a few clients if that happened. Jamie literally burst out laughing. How can someone be so relaxed when there's a trained detective interrogating them? Man, you crack me up, Mark. You're one hilarious dude. I'll give you that. I just wish you were as good a detective as you are a clown. You're facing multiple charges that could lead to more than 60 years in prison. Make that a life sentence when I connect you to the Adkins murder in a few days. How exactly is that hilarious to you? He's calling it a murder now. God, I really do hope this is a scare tactic. I can't even grasp the thought of my wife being dead. Murder? Is that how it is now, Big Shot? You don't even have a body, asshole. I literally own the police force, Mark. I'm perfectly aware of all your little scare tactics. You're pathetic. He wore a disgusted smirk on his face, but his smugness was still intact. Well, at least I tried, Hoffman said, reaching into his belt. He took out his gun and fired a bullet into Jamie's foot. Holy shit, this was insane. Jamie screamed out in pain, but his agony quickly turned into laughter. How could that be? The guy literally just got shot at, and he somehow found it funny. And so the plot thickens. Did you enjoy your little field trip, Mark? Jamie was now in a full-on fit of laughter. There's something seriously wrong with this guy. You sent me to Malu Island to find nothing. How funny. Hoffman cocked his gun and aimed it at Jamie's foot once again. You were wasting my time, so I thought I'd waste some of yours, Jamie said, still laughing hysterically. Hoffman then fired another shot into Jamie's foot, but this time around there was apparently no pain at all. In fact, it actually seemed to make Jamie laugh harder. Tell me what really happened to her, or it's your head next, Hoffman said, his weapon still firmly in hand. What really happened to her? Okay, what really happened to her is that I took her to my house and fucked her brains out. She begged me to stay, but I kicked her out as soon as I was done with her. Then after that, she probably killed herself when she realized she had to go back to Alex Davis.
Jamie's fit of laughter got louder and more obnoxious with every word that came out of his mouth. I officially lost my mind when he said that. I didn't care anymore. I was getting out of this car and walking up to the scene. I was going to take Hoffman's gun away from him and put a bullet through Jamie's skull. I was in the middle of unbuckling my seatbelt to do just that when Jamie spoke again. That's priceless, Mark. If only you could see the look on your face. This play just keeps getting better and better. Perhaps it's time for the final curtain, but it seems like all the actors are yet to arrive. Jamie actually stopped laughing. His demeanor took a sharp turn into something a lot more menacing. You know exactly who I'm talking about. That idiot you call your client, sitting in your car like a coward. Listening to me right now, I bet. Come out and play, Alex. I wanted to go. I most definitely would have done so if I didn't notice that Jamie had some kind of assault rifle hidden under one of his paintings. So instead, I stayed in the car, like a coward. At this point, I hated myself more than I hated Jamie. Hoffman noticed it too, and he carefully walked back to the car, still facing Jamie, with his firearm in hand. He got in and drove away. That somehow went even worse than anything I could have imagined. Well, goddamn, now we're dealing with an actual criminal. I told you this guy was bad news, Alex. I had this weird feeling about him ever since day one. Hey, let's not waste time. Let's go to Malu. And that's what we did. As soon as Hoffman and I stopped off at the boat rental, we immediately started scouring every little corner of Malu. Not just the place that Jamie mentioned like Hoffman did last time. Every bar, every restaurant, shop, public area, we went there, trying to discover any clues that could lead us to the truth. Our efforts were seemingly worthless, until we decided to investigate that old, rusted-looking well located on the most desolate area of the island. I really wish we hadn't done that, but in a way, I'm also glad we did. My sanity could not have handled a single additional ounce of uncertainty, so discovering the truth, as absolutely heartbreaking as it was, felt oddly rewarding. We opened the well, and our eyes met with nothing but a pile of darkness. However, the smell was a completely different story. The well emanated a pungent odor, the scent of rotting flesh and solidified blood. When Hoffman lit his flashlight to reveal the source of that disgusting smell, I threw up in my mouth. My eyes stared in disbelief as my chest sunk like it never had before. What we had discovered was Sophia's corpse, staring back at us with those lifeless eyes. To this day, that sight keeps me up at night. I just can't get it out of my head. The way her mouth was frozen open, her hands rested stiff on what used to be her thighs. In that moment, I couldn't do anything more than just stand there, too numb to even react. I felt the urge to scream or cry, but my body just didn't respond. Hoffman and I just froze there. I can't even tell you how long. Time just didn't feel real at that moment. Nothing about that sensation seemed real to me. It was a terrible nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. It was, without a doubt, the worst day of my life, and I can say with certainty that I doubt there will be a worse one. If by any chance Jamie Watkins happens to be reading this entry, let me just tell you, the murder case coming your way should be the least of your worries. If you're unlucky enough to run into me one day, I swear that I will put you through the most excruciating pain that the human body can handle. I don't give a shit if we're in public. I will tear the flesh off your bones, rip apart every single one of your organs, one by one. You took my life away from me. You took the only thing I had. You took her away from me. I swear to God that one day I will do the same. I don't care how much I have to sacrifice. I will go to any lengths to destroy you and everything you have, even if it costs me my life. Take this as a friendly warning if you value your life. The best thing you can do is just plead guilty and hide in a prison cell like the dirty rat you are for the rest of your miserable existence. But even that won't help you. I'll find you, and I will make you pay for what you did to me. It's been a year since the events of my last entry took place. This time has been very uneventful, but there's still some important things that perhaps I should share. Jamie Watkins got acquitted of first-degree murder. I don't even care anymore. I could see it coming from a mile away. We didn't have any DNA or any piece of real evidence, just the audio recording from Hoffman's interrogation
and those got easily shut down. Since there were no witnesses of the interrogation besides me and Hoffman, the judge didn't even allow us to play it for the jury. And even if he did allow it, Hoffman literally shot Jamie twice during the interrogation, so it would have done more harm than good anyway. Again, I don't care anymore. I learned the hard way that enough money can get you out of damn near anything. I distanced myself from almost every person in my life who was there for the nightmare. I only really stayed in touch with two people, Max and Cassie. Max is my best friend, and he's been incredibly supportive through all this, always there when I need someone to listen to my drunken rants. And Cassie, well, I get the feeling that I like her a lot more than she likes me. I've stopped by her house quite a few times, and although she always allows me to come inside, she definitely seems very uncomfortable around me. But for some reason, this doesn't really bother me. I feel safe when I'm around her. It's a feeling that I can't replace with anyone else. When I talk to her, I feel like Sophia's the one listening to me. Her facial expressions, her body language, her smile, even her scent just makes me feel at home. I suppose it makes sense, since she's my wife's twin sister, but there's still something special about Cassie that I can't really explain. Max has been trying his best to keep me away from her. He says she's preventing me from moving on. He also told me that I'm not trying to replace one twin with another, and that it's disgusting that I would even think of it. I think he's right. I know I have to do something about it. It isn't right, and it isn't fair to Cassie. Max told me about a friend of his, a middle-aged lady who used to work as a cashier. Her name is Monica. She quit a few months ago in order to set up her own spiritual shop, and apparently it's been a huge success. Clients are always satisfied, and she seems to magically get rid of people's problems. Just what I need. I decided to give it a try because, why not? It was going to be expensive for sure, but I figured it's better to spend my money on something that could help me, instead of buying nothing but pre-made food and whiskey. I drove there at night. Usually I'd be playing some music, but ever since the whole thing happened, I can't seem to enjoy anything anymore. Every song I used to listen to reminds me of her. Same with every movie and every show. Hopefully this Monica person can help me live a normal life again. Although I do have some serious doubts. Most places that sell spiritual items end up being a complete scam, at least from my experience. Hopefully this changes my mind. I arrived at the shop about 15 minutes after I left my house. Monica greeted me at the door and invited me inside. "You must be Max's friend, Alex, right?" she said with a big smile. "Yeah, that's me. I don't really know why I'm here exactly. There's something seriously wrong with me, so I'm hoping you could help me fix it." "Yes, Alex. Max told me all about you. I'm going to examine you, if that's okay. Please, take a seat." Examine me? What does she mean by that? I probably would have asked her to explain this examination of hers, but I really wasn't in the mood, and I didn't want to cause a scene. So I did exactly as she told me and sat down on the old brown armchair accommodated behind the counter. She then placed some sort of stone on my forehead, gently holding it still in her cold hand. After a few seconds, she removed her hand with the stone still in it, and just stayed quiet for a while. It was maybe close to a full minute before she spoke again. "You're broken. Something really traumatic happened, and you simply haven't been able to get over it. You're lost. You feel like you need to replace something that you've lost. But in reality, you don't know what you want. Give me a few minutes, please." Yeah, well, no shit. I think I already knew that, Monica. So far, this isn't quite worth the $500 fee she's charging me. Or that's what I thought, at least. She stepped into the back room of her shop, and shortly after, came out with a melting pot and a few plastic bags with powdered materials that seemed similar to cooking condiments, although I knew they were obviously not as they appeared to be. She then took the stone she had previously placed on my forehead and started to melt it. It was actually a soul crystal, as she called it. She started carefully measuring out and incorporating the powders into a hot goo. She kept on adding and mixing for about 5 minutes until she finally acknowledged me. She asked me to come closer as she did so. Without any warning, she took my hand and pinched my finger with a small needle she had, and as soon as a drop of blood splashed into the mixture, she spoke again. She softly whispered in a kind of pseudo-Latin, with her eyes closed, and then poured out the hot mixture onto a steel compass to create the needle. I hadn't understood the words, but what really caught my eye was the compass. Why did it need my blood? And why didn't she tell me anything before doing that? Monica handed it to me and briefly explained its function. "This is what we call a soul compass. Follow the needle, and it will lead you to the thing you desire most, above anything else. Maybe finding what you truly need can help you handle your grief a little better. If not, I'm always here to help." I thanked her and left. This got me really curious, so I decided to follow the needle until it stopped moving. It led me to Cassie's house. Don't panic, I thought to myself. Maybe it's leading me to something inside of Cassie's house, not Cassie herself. I don't know why, but I thought it'd be a great idea if I waited for her to leave her house so I could take a look around. Why do I keep putting myself in dangerous situations? Maybe that's why I so often see things I'm not supposed to see. At about 8 p.m., a little over an hour after I got there, I saw her leaving her house all dressed up for a night out on the town. But she was with Max? Why? I saw the compass needle follow her every step as she walked with my friend. At first I felt bad about breaking into her house, but now I needed to find out why she'd been hanging out with Max. I needed to know more. I just couldn't resist. I stepped out of my car and carefully made my way towards her room. She always kept the window slightly open enough for someone to sneak in. She was just as clumsy as Sophia in that regard. Before I knew it, I was in Cassie's room, and nothing really stood out until I took a closer look at the desk. A bunch of messy, unorganized paperwork and 2 perfectly packaged, unopened envelopes. To hell with it, I thought, and opened the first one. It was a bank receipt for the purchase of a property in Paris. Holy shit, I didn't know Cassie was moving to Paris, and I certainly didn't know that she had that kind of money. However, my that's weird reaction quickly turned into a what the hell when I opened the second envelope. It was a letter signed by Jamie Watkins. "Dear Sophia, I would like to inform you that so far everything is going swimmingly. Thanks to Maximilian's Surf Shop, I've been able to move my products like never before, and as a thank you gift, I bought you two a nice apartment out in the country. I will allow myself to suggest that you two move there as quickly as possible. I imagine the dental analysis for Cassie's body will be in rather soon, and when that happens, your cover will be blown. Best regards, Jamie Watkins."
Can you say that again?
Which part?
The date, Dad. The recorder wasn't close enough. I want to make sure we get everything.
Why is it so important that you get every last detail anyway?
Because that's what the doctor said, Dad. The more detail we get, the better he can help you.
Oh, is that right? He's gonna help me, huh? How's he gonna do that exactly? Stuff some more magic pills in my pocket? Maybe sign me up for group therapy? Those are always loads of fun.
No, I think he just wants to get a better understanding of...
He can't help me. Nobody can. Better psychiatrists have tried and failed. You wouldn't believe me anyway. There's no point.
Well, if nothing else, it would help us and the doc to make better decisions regarding you. Look, I promise that I'll listen to everything you have to say. I promise I'll believe you. All right?
Don't say that. You can't promise me something like that. It's all bullshit, and you know it.
All right, fine, fair enough. I promise that I will try to believe, okay? I'll try. Look, forget about the doctor, all right? I want to know what happened that night. Me. I want to know what you were doing in Norway. Why you can never get a good night's sleep. Just tell me. Please.
Fine. It's February 20th, 1943. That's when it all went down. The Axis powers had been almost driven out of Africa, and the Soviets had efficiently turned the tide of war in Eastern Europe. We had the Nazis on the run, for the time being, at least. They were vulnerable, sure, but they still had every capability of rebounding and kicking our asses. As such, the U.S. was particularly interested in taking out any and all Axis weapon development programs.
Weapon development programs? What, like tanks or atomic bombs or...
Exactly. The Allies, specifically, targeted their hard water factories to cripple their production of atomic bombs. But there were other targets. Their so-called Wonder Weapons project, scattered all over German-occupied territory. Manufacturing depots, chemical weapons labs, bioweapon research centers, etc., etc. That's what I was doing in Norway.
Where in Norway did they send you?
Northern Norway. Far off the mainland lay an island with a Nazi outpost on it. Very little was known about the place at the time regarding its exact purpose and mission. According to our spies inland and the Norwegian rebels, the locals referred to it simply as Fort Ond. They said it was a bad place, that the prisoners who were taken there were never seen again, that the water bordering its shores were barren of all aquatic life and colder than even the most bone-chilling frostbite. Command didn't give a shit about any of that, though. They were only concerned with two things. Why is this installation so far away from German homeland, and why is it so far from mainland Norway? The conclusion they came to was that the Nazis had to be developing some sort of weapon that they didn't want to risk infecting a lot of people with.
So, they thought it was a chemical weapons plant?
No, they thought it was a bioweapons lab. Smallpox, anthrax, that kind of stuff. We thought that's what they were doing there, but we didn't know for sure. That's when my unit came in, and where Operation Maelstrom was greenlit.
Maelstrom?
I didn't pick the damn name anyway, so they wanted to keep the operation as covert as possible. Minimum manpower, 1 squad of British SAS, 1 squad of Canadian Commandos, and last but not least, 1 squad of Army Rangers, including yours truly.
What was the purpose of the mission? Just to gather intel, or,
Our first priority was the eradication of the fort's inhabitants and the seizure of any relevant intel. However, we were also prepared for it to turn into a sabotage mission at a moment's notice. Leadership felt pretty confident about the bioweapons theory and didn't want to take any chances with letting the stuff potentially get away, hence the limited manpower. The last thing we wanted was for the Krauts to get spooked by a large invasion force and flee with the samples.
Dad, are you okay?
Yeah, just give me a second.
Really? You gotta do that now, huh?
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Is the smoke gonna bother your little nose that much? Would you prefer I did it somewhere else?
I'd prefer you didn't do it at all, though in a way it's oddly inspiring. Senior citizen, part of the greatest generation, still puffing that shit all these years like it's of no consequence to your health.
To hell with the consequences. Can I continue now, or is this gonna turn into an intervention? 'Cause if so, tell me now so I can save you the time and just leave the room to enjoy the rest of my smoke.
No, please, continue.
We were all flown to Iceland for our briefing. From the moment I arrived, I had no doubt about the operation. The sheer lack of intel we had to go off regarding fort-sized manpower and the exact purpose just seemed odd to me. I remember thinking to myself, I hope there's enough men. When I did so, I caught my friend Weathers looking around too. I could tell he was thinking the same thing. From there, we boarded a British destroyer that took us less than 10 miles from the island. We had to travel the remaining distance on our own in 2 PT boats. I remember just how cold it was that night, how we all subconsciously stood closer to each other than normal in a vain attempt to stay warm, like a bunch of penguins, the lot of us. It was a half-an-hour ride to the island, so we stayed like that for a while, just hunkered up and trying to keep warm as much as we could while we waited for any sign of something. When we were about a mile from the island, we got the sign. We saw it long before we got near the stuff. When we did, we all went silent and watched as we slowed down our boats to make a cautious approach. A thick fog had blanketed the sea around the coastline in all directions for about half a mile. It had a faint red hue to it. Not a deep red, just a faintly visible one. It towered above us nearly 15 feet in the air like a tidal wave and seemingly stared us down. We slowly crept our boats up to it inch by inch until our bows were nearly kissing it. From there, a few of the Canadians on the adjacent boat got some equipment and began prodding the fog for any signs of toxin. We all sat there and waited for them to finish their work. As they did, I took notice of the absolute unnaturalness of it all. It made no movement towards us, nor away from us, yet it billowed and contracted and breathed soothingly in places like you would expect a body of smoke to do. I remember distinctly thinking of it not as a wall, but more like a veil or a curtain, hiding the island from us. A few minutes later, the Canadians signaled over to our boats and gave our commander, Captain Hawks, the thumbs up. The fog wasn't toxic as far as they could tell. Given our mission, though, we couldn't take any chances of it being gas of some kind. Better safe than sorry. So we donned our gas masks and made sure our suits were nice and sealed up. I, in particular, had taken the liberty of duct taping around the gloves and boots to ensure it was tight. Then we started our boats back up and slowly sailed into the unknown. First, I couldn't see anything. The fog was so thick it limited my visibility to just a few feet in front of me, and even less in front of that boat. We couldn't have our lights on for fear of being spotted. When we were out in the open water, this was fine, of course. The moon and stars lit up the surrounding water nicely. But now, there was little to no light penetrating the fog, and we were engulfed in near total darkness. So we just slowly inched our way forward, safely as we could. I just sat there and watched the red vapor hit and dance off my goggles when I searched for any sign of land. For a while, nobody said a word. We all just waited for what seemed like an eternity. The longer we pushed ahead, the tighter the grip on my rifle became as my nerves started up. Finally, one of the Brits broke the silence. I watched him tap the man in front of him and heard him whisper, "You sure this is right?" His sentence was quickly interrupted. We had landed. The entire boat shook wildly as a few of us lost our footing and had to grab the side walls to stay upright. As we did so, I looked around me and noticed the fog gradually growing thinner as we made our approach. Steadily, its opacity diminished. I could begin to see shapes through the veil. The crunching noises ceased a few seconds later, and with them, so did the fog from my line of sight. It was still there, but it was thinner and lower to the ground than it was on the open sea. It only came up to our knees from that point on, which meant I could finally see our objective, the island. It was a mess of scattered jagged rocks and hills, caverns and towering cliffs that seemed to scatter in all directions, like a porcupine made of stone. At its center, one giant hill stood out. I followed it from the base to the peak with my eyes, and at its peak there was a door. That was it. No trace of human life, no pathways, no trenches, no buildings of any kind. Nothing that would suggest any sort of operation that we were undertaking on the island. There were a few guard towers, of course. We knew at least that much from our aerial photos, but we had chosen our landing site specifically to be in a blind spot they wouldn't see us from. That was it, though. Apart from the door that stuck out amidst the terrain, looking utterly unnatural in the distance, there was no sign of life. No buzzing insects, no splashing fish, no chirping birds, not even the wind itself seemed to bow before the island's authority and ceased completely. No life whatsoever. I thought back to when my first encounter of the fog and just how right I was in my thought process. We truly had crossed a veil of some kind. Captain Hawks gave the hand signals. We all filed out and patrolled inland as fast as we could to a nearby cave. The Norwegians were waiting for us there.
The Norwegians? Were they the ones who gave you the fort's intel to begin with?
The very same. Adding them to our roster brought our total to 35 men.
Dad, it's okay. Take your time.
We headed into the cave and linked up with the Norwegians, who sat steadfast in a defensive position. One of them stood up as soon as we breached the darkness of the cavern and swung his gun over in our direction, shouting at us, presumably to lower our weapons, before quickly lowering his own to make a half-hearted apology. Hawks was livid. He stormed over to the man with one forceful strike of his fist and sent the poor Norwegian hurtling towards the ground. You some kind of fucking moron, kid? I was this close to blowing your goddamn head off. The commander of the Norwegians rushed over to stand between the two of them. Please forgive us, sir. We've been on the edge since we arrived a few days ago. It was an honest mistake. He helped his fallen soldier back to his feet and ordered him to the back of the cave to tend to his face. Afterwards, he and Hawks stared at each other for a few seconds in silence while we all just waited to see who would speak. The leader of the Norwegians spoke first. Something is wrong, very wrong. Our intel is severely off, he said. None of the guard towers have occupants, and we haven't seen Nazi soldiers patrolling the island in 3 days. We've been spying on the island for weeks now, as best we could. The entire time we did so, the soldiers were patrolling the shores, manning the towers and watching the coastlines. But 3 days ago, this fog emerged, obscures our vision, and made it nearly impossible to see anything on the island. Since we arrived, we've done multiple sweeps and scouting runs along the island's surface before you arrived. No one is here, American, not a soul. It's like they just vanished, at least from the island's surface. I looked back over at McKinley, who did the same. We exchanged confused looks at one another before looking back at the two leaders, who were now talking too quietly for anyone to hear. Finally, Hawks turned to face us and gave a deep sigh. We think the Nazis have locked themselves away in the fort's cave system and interior. According to our good buddies here, the island's surface is safe. Let's hope they're right. Conduct final checks on all your equipment, then form up by the cave entrance. We're going in. So we got into formation and made our way up the rough terrain to the door. It was the one I had spotted when we had landed. As far as we could tell, it was the only entrance to the interior of the fort. The absence was nerve-wracking. The cold, wet staircase that led up to the fort entrance proved difficult to scale with all my equipment, which was made all the more dangerous, of course, by the fog. With it clinging about knee level on every surface of the island, made it damn near impossible to see where you were stepping, so we just slowly tiptoed our way up to the door as best we could. All the while, nobody uttered a word. So quiet I could hear my own heartbeat throbbing in my ears. Eventually, we reached the top of the stairs. The door itself was monolithic.
Monolithic, huh? What, like ancient?
Oh yeah, stood nearly 9 feet tall and looked like it was made out of bronze or copper. I don't know, some kind of faintly orange metal. It was covered in strange engravings that could only be described as hieroglyphics. They weren't, of course, but that was the only comparison I'd been able to find since that day. And believe me, I've tried. I looked through every damn book I could think of. Nothing comes close to the symbols and markings I saw engraved on that door. It was like a foreign language of some kind. Didn't look like it was written or chipped away from the door by an expert's hand, so much as it looked like it was slashed or cut, like something had hacked its way in with claws or teeth to create the strange writing. It didn't look like a human hand had done it neither. Looking up at the door, I felt like an explorer, like I'd found something lost to mankind for millennia, and I was rediscovering it. Only I didn't want to be the person to discover this. At that moment, I wasn't sure I wanted to be aware that this place existed, let alone be the one to have to open that damn door and walk into God knew what. We readied our explosives, expecting to have to breach our way in. To our surprise, though, the wooden beam that was attached to the door lifted. The monolith opened slightly, and with it came a stench of utter and all-devouring rot, like pus and spoiled milk, bile and sulfur, all fused into one unholy concoction that assaulted my nostrils and instantly forced tears down my cheeks. First I panicked, believing my mask wasn't secure, tight enough, and I was inhaling a toxin of some kind. But when I looked up and saw that all my team members were doing the same, our masks all working fine, we couldn't have all had potential leaks, right? The smell was truly just that powerful. The door had only given way and opened a tiny bit. Our front man quickly had to ask for help as the door was too heavy to heave by himself. 4 men, including me, pushed with all our mights and then quickly ran out of the way as soon as the door was completely open, so the guys behind us could aim down that opening. When they did, they didn't see much. Their flashlights shined straight into a wall, angling down and away from us. What lay before us was another staircase, carved out of the very stone of the mountain itself. The fog clung lower to the ground past the doorway, only coming up to about ankle height, but it still obscured the steps all the same. We stared down the doorway, waiting for orders to advance, but Hawk said nothing. He just stood there with his gun trained ahead and his other hand held up, silently telling us to wait. I suspected he was listening, waiting to hear any communication from us opening the heavy door, for any sign of enemies. There were none, however. Not a sound could be heard from down the staircase, just like everywhere else so far. Goff leaned over to me and tapped me on the shoulder. "Something's not right, man," he whispered. I did not respond. I didn't feel I needed to. Everyone was already thinking the same thing anyway. No point in vocalizing it, especially not when I think we could all see what Hawks was thinking. I watched a chill run up his spine that shook his held-up hand and rifle slightly in place. I'd never seen him like that before. He steadied himself, and with a low, reassuring grunt, which was probably more for his benefit than ours, he gave the order, "File in." So we went. We descended for about 20 feet. The staircase itself was dark, but we could see light at the bottom. The sight of light was a relief. Instantly, I felt a tiny shred of my anxiety wither away as my instincts took hold. I readied myself for any Germans that might be waiting for us at the bottom. There were no Germans, though. None left anywhere. None alive. When I reached the bottom of the staircase, the scene laid out before me like something you'd see in a crime scene. It was a big square room illuminated by gas lanterns in its center. The door directly ahead of us led to an opening in the floor with a ladder hooked to it. 2 doorways on our left and right, like a plus sign or a cross. Various crates and workstation desks lay toppled over, all facing the direction of the newly discovered staircase, like sentry posts. They all faced towards the same point, scattered throughout the room where the Nazis, half sunken in the fog and slightly obscured by it, draped over the crates, leaning up against the walls, crumpled up like soda cans in the corners. There were at least a dozen of them, their blood pooled beneath their feet, but I hardly noticed it through the tinted fog. I took a step forward, and that's when I heard the familiar jingling of empty bullet casings beneath my feet. Subsequently, bullet holes could be seen in nearly every square inch of the wall in front of us. Jesus Christ, Weathers shouted as we entered the room, prompting Hawks to hold up his hand and signal for us to shut up. "Whoever the fuck did this might still be here. Stay frosty," he muttered sternly to us. "Fan out. Check the room on our flanks," he commanded via hand signals. Half our men went to the room on the right, while the remaining went left. I, along with 3 others, stood guard in the lit room, kept our guns trained on the ladder ahead of us. As I knelt behind a crate to take a better defensive position, I noticed one of the Nazis was laying face down in a puddle of his own blood. I kept my rifle trained ahead as I slowly reached over and heaved on his shoulder, forcing him to roll onto his back. He had a look of utter terror frozen on his face, with eyes wide open and mouth agape. He bore cuts and large slash marks up his chest and torso, which caused his entrails to expose themselves slightly. I looked around the room at the other men to verify, and sure enough, the ones who were submerged in the fog shared similar wounds of size and volume. The fuck happened here? I thought to myself. That thought was quickly overtaken by a doubly terrifying realization. I looked at the bullet holes directly ahead of me and thought, whatever the hell happened here, I'm standing in the same place they were. After a few tense moments of sitting with that realization, the squad checking the right room emerged, holding a few books and folders. They bore similar engravings to the ones seen on the door upon our arrival, and were bound in leather so ancient that it looked like the faintest breeze would disintegrate them if they weren't careful. They showed it to Hawks, who took one of the books and began sifting through the pages. At first, he scanned the pages carefully and thoroughly, but he quickly thereafter began to shuffle through them frantically and impatiently, before reaching back and shoving it into his pack. Right about that time, the squad from the left room emerged. A British soldier approached and said, "Just more dead krauts, sir. There's something. We found cages big enough to fit a human in. There were bodies in them, but they weren't German civilians," the Norwegian team leader interrupted. "These were fucking animals." Hawks looked like he was getting ready to say something, but he didn't get the chance. All conversation and thoughts were stopped when the sound of screaming could be heard down the ladder. With one uniform motion, all remaining men turned their guns to face the same direction as I already was. We waited for what felt like an eternity for a head to come bobbing up in the opening of the floor, for the sound of footsteps, for any sign of enemies. Nothing came. After a few minutes or so, Hawks gave the order. We were going down there. I really didn't want to do this anymore.
Dad, please, you can do it. Just take a second, okay?
The smell, Patrick.
What about it?
I can't get it out of my nose. It's been 60 goddamn years since then, and I can't get it out of my nose. God, by the time we reached the bottom, Garf had already vomited. I had to fucking cover him while he did it. Good thing I hadn't eaten anything before the briefing, else I would have too. When we reached the bottom, there was nobody, just like the rest of the island. No signs of life.
What did you see at the bottom of the ladder?
Well, it was a large cavern-like room with multiple passageways that branched off in all directions, but at its center was a well, made out of the same stone as the mountain. It somehow looked older, more ancient, more monolithic. Along its rim were the same damn etchings and carvings as the door. Upon closer examination, we saw what the source of the fog was that had plagued us since our arrival. We watched it for a while and observed the fog billowing up and out and over the top, well, in all directions at a constant, unnatural rate. Couldn't believe that such a tiny source could have produced as much as we'd seen up to that point. I couldn't believe that the colossal wall that we'd encountered upon our arrival originated from such a minuscule well deep in the mountain. As we spread out to cover the other passageways, I approached it and leaned over. Patrick, the smell was so strong that I was thrown back onto my hands and knees almost immediately from the stomach contractions. It was the source of the fog, of the smell, of everything.
What was in the well?
Blood. The whole fucking thing was full of blood. More blood than I'd ever seen in my life. More than the room upstairs. More than any other mission I'd ever seen on. And it was fresh. It boiled gently. It seemed to move on its own as though it were alive and aware of our presence in the room. And when I gazed upon it, the attack on my nose and stomach seemed like one of calculation, as though a cobra had spat in my face for daring to get too close. I wasn't allowed even a second to recover from the stench, however. At that exact moment we heard more screams. Seemingly every passage in the cavern emitted what I can only describe as a wail of anguish, like the flesh was being peeled off somebody's forearm and pouring salt back into the wound at the same time. They pierced all our ears like razor blades and made me wince so hard I almost forgot about my stomach pain. How big is this place? I thought to myself. What the hell could be happening just down those tunnels? Fuck this, Hawk said. Start planting charges. We are getting out of this place as soon as possible. It was music to all our ears. One of the soldiers came over to check on me and the rest as we began to start laying charges. There was nothing professional about our process. We were just laying them out as fast as we could so that we could get the hell out of that stenched place and back to the boats. The screams continued the entire time we worked.
Were they getting closer?
I don't know. They sounded like they were coming from every passage all at once, but it was hard to tell. We had a man eyeing down every doorway just in case, though. Didn't matter. We should have been watching the walls. As I struggled to compose myself to get back to my feet, I had a front row seat for what was about to happen. Goff, the poor bastard, he was doing his rounds, laying his charges along the floor, around the well. I wanted to speak up, to tell him not to get too close, but I was still sucking in air through my teeth and couldn't get the words out. All I could do was hold my hand out to him and grunt. He turned to face me. "You gonna make it?" was the last thing I heard him say. At that very moment, an arm shot out of the well behind him, locked itself around his neck, and pulled him in head first. The arm was inhumanly long, more like a tentacle than an arm, but its form was undeniably human. It wrapped itself around his neck and dug its fingers into the side of his face as it dragged him deeper and deeper down. I watched him thrash around and kick his legs wildly in vain as he attempted to get free, spraying torrents of blood in all directions around him. He was already halfway submerged by the time our men got a hold of his feet. When they did so, another hand shot out of the wall and locked itself around Goff's waist, now pulling him in faster. I could hear gurgling and see bubbles of air making their way to the well's surface. Poor bastard was drowning in that putrid liquid. The men pulled with all their might, but it didn't slow down his descent in any noticeable way. They heaved and barked orders to the others like rabid dogs, desperate to save our comrades, but no help came. We were alone with the incomprehensible, and it was winning. The rest of us simply stood by dumbfounded and watched as he was forcibly dragged into the well, inch by inch. When it was clear that the men could do nothing more, they let go and took a few steps back. Their entire arms were covered in blood to the elbow. For a moment, nothing happened. Nothing said a word, moved a muscle, did anything. We all just faced the wall and tried our best to process what had just happened. Didn't last long. The well began to gurgle and bubble as though it were digesting my friend. It began to overflow, slow and thick crimson liquid oozing over the top of the well and onto the cold stone floor beneath, making its way towards us. I was the first to move. I stood up and began to slowly step backwards towards the ladder. That's when the massacre began. In an instant, all hell erupted around us. The same arms that had dragged my friend to a then unknown fate sprang out of the walls around us as the island became alive and began to frantically swing around, searching for bodies to claim. A few of them found their mark and pulled some of the men towards the walls, wrapping themselves around their necks and locking them in place and suffocating them. Any sense of composure our toughest men had remaining left their bodies that very moment, and we all made a mad dash for the ladder. The room was only dimly lit by all our flashlights, though. When we broke our formation and began to run, our visibility became significantly limited. Bodies ran into each other, and men began slipping on blood that now reached for their feet. The fog had all begun rising in intensity at a startling rate, and was now almost as thick and copious as it was out on the sea. This made it all the more hard to tell what exactly was happening, and before I knew it, I was knocked onto my ass by one of the Canadians as he ran straight into me. The blood rose higher and higher at an inconceivably fast rate. It was halfway up my knees by the time I regained my footing. When I did, I felt a sudden rush of movement brush past my leg. That's when I saw it. There were shapes moving in the blood, large, serpentine-like shapes that slithered all around us and began to quickly encircle my team. Like sharks, they enveloped us, poised for the kill. They seemed to be probing us for weaknesses, waiting for the exact right moment to strike and take as many of us down as they could. I wasn't gonna let them get me. My body moved independent of my paralysis psyche as I sprinted for the ladder and reached as high as I could to escape the cavern. However, the ladder was barely wide enough to fit one man on it. It was made of wood and was not meant to support the weight of more than a couple of men at a time. I remember just how careful we had to scale it just to get down to the cursed room in the first place. I worried it was going to give way any second, and I'd be stranded in that room with those things, with the well. I felt it crack and buckle beneath me as more men than intended all tried to climb it at once. I pushed into the men above me just as the person did below me, all in a desperate race to escape. Just when I was sure all was lost and I'd never make it out, I reached the top and rolled onto my back. As I did, I heard a loud snapping sound, followed by 8 loud splashes hitting the liquid below. I rolled over and shined my flashlight down the hole to look at the scene and try to help some of the men escape what would now become a tomb. It was no use, though. It was 20 feet down. I couldn't reach any of them. Weathers, McKinney, they stared up at me and shouted for help, but what was I supposed to do? The blood had risen to above their waistbands by that point, and there was more of those fucking things circling them. They climbed over one another in a desperate attempt to get enough height to reach the exit, but I was nowhere near enough. I felt so helpless. I watched the mysterious shapes and figures in the blood creep up to them from behind. Then, as if coordinated, in an instant, they pounced and dragged 3 men under the murky depths at once. In that split second, when they had leapt from the pool to attack the men, I caught only the faintest glimpse of their true form. They were like eels or or leeches with spider legs and beaks. Something of that family, but it's still not an accurate comparison. They were truly otherworldly, inhuman, even to creation itself. They were abominations that I'm glad they were obscured by the fog, as to have glanced upon them in all their unholiness would have been too much for me at that moment. They yanked the men down into that ocean of blood. As they did so, the men thrashed around chaotically and knocked more men over, making the already futile pyramid of terrified men all the more pitiful. That's when I noticed the 3 that were taken by those serpents were being dragged towards the well. They were being dragged to the well so it could devour them, just like Goff had been taken away to that unspeakable fate. I looked at the edge of the room to search for the first victim of the attack, the one who had been forcibly dragged towards the well by the arm. When I found them, I felt my stomach churn once again. Their bodies were halfway into the cavern walls. Their arms were dragging the men head first into the island itself to be consumed. It was as though the island was alive, the well was alive, and it wanted us dead. The remaining few screamed and pleaded and begged for me to help them. All I could do was stare down at the chaos before me and watch. I was ripped out of my comatose state by a firm hand on my shoulder. It was Hawks. "Get up. We gotta get out of here." He picked me up by the back of my shirt and dragged me to my feet, pushing me up the staircase. I didn't have a plan. I just ran. My body was truly on autopilot. I couldn't think of anything other than the men we were leaving behind, and the looks I saw on the faces of those men as they screamed at me for help. The fog had now completely engulfed the inside of the fort, and I struggled to maintain my footing as I ran as fast as I could through the first chamber and up the staircase. As we exited the main door, I was stopped dead in my tracks. I heard gunshots behind me. By God, they were still alive. They were still fighting to get out, and I was abandoning them. Hawks once again yanked me by the back of the shirt as he went past, encouraging me onward. "There's nothing we can do for 'em. We gotta get to the boats now." And with that, he ran off ahead of me through the red smoke. Every fiber of my being compelled me to go back, but my body refused to obey. I just stood there trembling, white knuckles grasping my rifle as I struggled to make a choice. After a few agonizing seconds of contemplation, I followed after Hawks and made my way to the boat, to freedom. As we sped away from the island, I was able to slowly creep back to the real world mentally and finally take note of my surroundings. It was me, Hawks, and 3 other British troops. Only 5 men had made it out. None of us said a word. We all just kept to ourselves and stared off into space, doing our best to process what had happened. I looked back at Fort Ond one last time before it disappeared over the horizon. The fog had grown larger now, redder, hungrier. When we got back to the destroyer, we told command everything that we had seen and what had happened. They didn't believe a word of it. I can't really say as I blame them. We must have sounded insane. Showing up, missing 30 men, covered head to toe in blood, rambling about a mysterious well, our friends being dragged away by an unknown creature to an unknown fate, ancient bronze doors, and slaughtered Nazi soldiers. They told us that we had most likely been exposed to nerve gas, that the base was being classified as a possible chemical weapons lab, and that when we inhaled the fog, maybe we were subjected to hallucinations. But we were sealed up head to toe. We stood up for ourselves as best we could. We all corroborated each other's stories and validated each other's testimonies. We swore up and down till we were blue in the face that the island was not what they thought it was, that our friends had been killed by an unknown force, and that we had to destroy the fort. They just stared at us like we were a pack of lunatics. They had made up their minds about what had happened to us on the island. Any attempts made by any of us to get the record straight only served to make us look even more insane. I turned to one of the admirals and spoke up one last time. I had to know something before they turned us away. Please tell me you guys are gonna level that place. He stared at me for a few tense seconds before simply saying, "We'll handle it." And with that, it was over. All the remaining members of Operation Maelstrom were discharged the next day, deemed medically unfit to continue service. Each of us was briefed individually on the events of that night, and I was told not to utter a word to anyone about the events of Operation Maelstrom, or to disclose the fort's location to anyone. The colonel who was briefing me told me, "For the record, I believe there's at least a little truth to what you told us. But regardless, you and the survivors are a liability now, unstable and erratic. We can't risk putting any of you onto another operation, not after what happened to you. Or at least, not after what you think happened to you. I'm sorry, but this is for your own good." I was put on a plane the next day and sent home. That's it. You don't believe a word of what I just said to you, do you?
Well, no, not all of it. I mean, I want to, but it's a little much to
I know how it sounds. You think I don't hear myself saying this shit to you? I know how it must sound, but it's true, son. The well is real. What happened to me was real.
Look, I'm sure it must have felt that way, Dad, but you have to...
You don't believe a word of it. Nobody does. You, the doctors, every other person I've confided in just thinks I'm a lunatic who imagined all of this. I see the way you're looking at me, like I'm just a poor old man who's losing his mind. I know what I saw. I know what I went through. You weren't there.
I know I wasn't. I'm not saying I was, Dad, but come on, work with me. Isn't it possible it was a nerve agent or something? How the hell would you know it wasn't?
'Cause we all saw the same damn thing. All the survivors of Maelstrom gave the exact same testimony upon our return. Everything from our encounter with the fog to our return to the ship was synced up perfectly. What do you think, we all hallucinated the same thing?
No, I just think maybe...
You know, they took the books that Captain Hawks acquired. Oh yeah, they made sure we kept nothing from our mission, stripped us bare right after we returned to the ship, but told me what he saw in those pages. More of those strange symbols, those hieroglyphics of unknown origin, the mention of Towesey Hole, some kind of portal to hell or somewhere worse or God knows where. You want to know why I can't sleep at night, Patrick? The real reason is 'cause I know it's still there. We'll handle it, they said. Yeah, like hell they did. They probably just set up shop themselves and tried finishing what the Kraut started. Or maybe not. Maybe they heard our warnings and listened to us. Maybe they shelled the place into oblivion and actually did handle it. But I'll never know, son. I'll never get my closure on the events of what happened that night. I'll never get to know with 100% certainty that the well has been sealed and that whatever lies in the depths of Fort Ond can't get me anymore.
Let's just take some deep breaths, okay? Why don't you just calm down and...
This was a waste of time. It always is with people like you.
Dad, come on, please.
We're done here. Turn that damn thing off and get...
The tape ends there. I couldn't find any additional tapes in my father's belongings, so for the time being, that's where the story ends. I didn't know my grandpa too well. He died when I was 12 and was reclusive. Sadly, this tape is one of the only glimpses I've gotten into his life. I don't know what to believe. It's easy to write him off as crazy or the victim of a gas attack, but the fear I heard on that tape sounded way too real. It's gotta mean something, right? If nothing else, the torment he endured was real, and maybe that's all that matters. Or maybe, just maybe, he's right. Maybe Fort Ond still stands, exactly as he described, hidden somewhere behind the veil of fog.